Good evening and welcome to the November 30th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. This is a continuation of our November 9th meeting discussing the central area plan for Issaquah. So we have with us tonight 3 members of the commission, the task force that created the plan. And we also have asked to join us 3 members of the community, 2 members of the community. So we have a full house tonight. So as always, we have to start the meeting with the approval of the minutes. And we have 2 minutes to approve. The one from November the 9th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November the 9th?
I move to approve the minutes from November 9th.
A second?
I'll second.
All those in discussion? Any changes? All those in favor say aye.
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 And we also had a little different meeting on November 16th where some of our members went out to see the community so they're better informed on discussion for the planning for the central area. So we have minutes that have to be approved from that night. And I know some of you were there. So even you all have the opportunity to vote on the people who were there, besides the regular members. So I need a motion to approve the minutes of November 16th.
Where are those minutes in this printout, are they?
Page 13.
They're the minutes of the trip.
Oh, I
that
see,
you
this
took.
is it, okay. All right, motion to approve?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say, no discussion. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So with that, I'm going to turn over the meeting to our illustrious planning department head guy, director, Keith Niven. So please tell us some of the changes that you've made since our last meeting.
Thank you. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Welcome back to work. Tonight's a heavy lift. We're going to go through so we met, y'all had van tours, and y'all made it safely out through your van tour, so I was glad about that. And we also had kind of a primer on this, or a first step, where we talked about the existing central plan visions. And we had some conversations about 10 districts, 10 neighborhoods. You know, does that make sense? We talked about train stations and other things. And so we took those comments, as well as some of the comments that we heard during the tours, and we gave you guys version 2.0 or 7.0 or 20.0, whatever version it happens to be. And so tonight what I'd like to do is kind of take you guys through a series of questions, rather than just opening it up and saying, did you love it, which I think would land us in 20 different conversations pointing 20 different directions. I thought we would have a little bit more structured conversation, which is one of the reasons why I asked for the opportunity, and I appreciate the chair giving me the grace to allow the public to be up here, because I think it would be best to have public comment at each topic rather than waiting till the end when hopefully we've all decided what we want to do. So here we go. Hang on to your hats. So I wanted just to start with a reminder. So Central Issaquah Plan is a part of the comprehensive plan, and it is a sub-area plan for basically a big section of the valley floor. And that plan is comprised of guiding principles and district visions and policies, and then ultimately it lands in development and design standards. And really what we're talking about tonight is just kind of this one planet that's circling out here on the right. And really, we have to keep in mind, or I'd like for us to keep in mind, that these other pieces are still part of the plan. They are still there. This that we're doing this evening is not a standalone document, and it's not really intended to be a standalone document. When we're done with it, the intent that I have is the section on districts in the Central Issaquah plan now, we rip those pages out, we put these new ones in, and the plan is still the plan. I mean, I think generally speaking, the vision for the plan itself is we're kind of, we all believe in that. We all are expecting that to be the future of Central Issaquah. I think the ask was, do we need to clarify the vision so that we have more predictability that we're actually going to get there? All right? And so why I listed these things out here on the left, architecture, urban design manual, vertical mixed use, structured parking, inclusionary requirements, all of those things came through you guys. They are all what I would consider evolutions in the document itself, but they're over here in development and design standards. So this is the nuts and bolts, the regulations of what developers have to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They tend to be black and white. They should be black and white. If they aren't black and white, then we have problems. This over here, this is a little bit more it's a little bit more directional in that this is what we want you to do, but there might be a couple different ways to get there. And so with that, here's my first question. So the document that you got that was part of the packet, the first part of this document is really intended to kind of tell a story. Telling a story of why we're updating the visions. And I think my first question for you, and I think maybe it makes sense for the commission and task force to have some conversation and then ask for the public to see if they have any comments and then let you guys kind of finish off your thoughts on this. So this is, I don't want to spend a ton of time on the story because I don't know that the story is really where we should be spending most of our time. I think it should be clear as a stepping stone to the actual neighborhood descriptions, but it was really more to document why we are doing what we're doing. So I guess looking for comments, thoughts from the commission first and the task force on kind of the story.
So I think in general it works. I think the piece that's missing for me, I went back and watched the Land and Shore meeting when you presented it to council. I think one of the things that's missing then is the why for the community in order to get the community buy-in. And so I think talking about why we're looking at density and describing these neighborhoods as a way to preserve the hillsides, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be a good addition.
Tagging on to that, I had the same thought, and I documented it a little different. We have a Central Issaquah district vision and such like that, but we don't all have the overall benefit to the community. Why should current residents support this? And I just jotted down, the number one goal of the CIP plan should be to sustain and enhance quality of life for Issaquah's residents even as we grow. In other words, for those people who are already here, we're not forgetting about you to accommodate thousands of newcomers. We want to sustain and enhance your quality of life too, even as we enable more growth over the next 30 years. So I think that needs to be in there to let people living here today know that they're a priority too.
And I'd like to add on, I think there's a really key part that's missing from all of this, and that's the jobs piece. Because we focus so much on what the town is going to look like physically, the type of residents we're going to have, mixed use and so on, but what is the economic, what is the job market going to look like? Is it going to be retail? low-income retail? Is it going to be at median, 100% of median income? Are they going to be office jobs? Are they going to be commercial jobs? And I think that's a really key piece, because right now we are at almost 100% of what our targets are supposed to be, or a target, 100% of our residential unit target. And our job market, I don't have the numbers, but I think they're only at 10%. However, but not much higher than that. So
I think that's addressed in the economic vitality section, but maybe just beefing that up to talk when we're talking about this story portion at the beginning, not going into an
Right.
individual.
Okay.
So my feedback is just, I think we're missing jobs.
I think that's fair. I think that, clearly, I think partially because, we were really trying to get housing on the valley floor. There was definitely a big slant towards the residential part of this. And then we started talking about placemaking and turning them into neighborhoods. But, in my mind, they are neighborhoods with jobs too. So I think we can definitely add more flavor associated with jobs. I think that's a valid point.
So my impression was that a lot of these pieces that people are pointing out are in the first pages, but they're sort of in two different places, because there's the fresh look, which I really like the way that's organized with the graphics, and then there's also the first page, which has the plan vision broken down into sections. So I think that it does tell a story, but it's a little bit repeating and kind of in a different way, and so maybe it could just be made more succinct so that people can see, this is really the economic part, this is really the livable part. And my other comment on the first pages is I think I would reorder them also, because I think livable, instead of distinctive coming first, livable coming first.
From a storytelling standpoint, I like how you're starting to play around with district versus sub-district versus neighborhood. And I think that can be leveraged a little bit, maybe a little more explicitly, because I think since the commission has recommended kind of merging the growth area into one district so that there are very specific district-wide visions, but then there's also a concern about, not abandoning the distinctive characteristics of the sub-districts. I think I would recommend going all in on using word choice to drive that, where districts are these 4 big parcels that we're talking through, and then using neighborhoods to refer to what were previously the much smaller districts. I think you kind of, you can tell that's how whoever, as this was being written, that was kind of being done. I think that's a really helpful way to think about it, that we have formal districts, and then within those districts, particularly the central district, or the growth area district, there are then neighborhoods, where those neighborhoods are more or less the various constituent districts that we had in prior drafts. I think using that kind of, because we spent a lot of time trying to decide if we wanted to call them districts versus neighborhoods. I think referring to the growth area as a district and then the 4 or 5 sub-pieces as neighborhoods might be a helpful way to leverage both of those words. So you'd still be able to refer to neighborhoods having a particular distinctiveness while also having a district distinctiveness and identity and placemaking and so forth.
I have to jump in on this one. The foundation from the task force's work, we floundered for 3 or 4 meetings until we coalesced around this whole concept of the green necklace. And yet that's not really documented much in this plan. There's one little paragraph, but even that doesn't capture it. And then when you get into each neighborhood vision, it's not even mentioned. But there are specific segments of it, like Issaquah Trail or other things that are mentioned, but it's not capturing the foundational element of what this whole plan was about, which is that every resident, even as we grow, should have nature at their doorstep, be able to walk out their high-rise condo door to this green necklace of connected trails and open space that follows Tibbetts Creek to the state park, over to Issaquah Creek, up into the Confluence Park, up Maple Juniper Trail, over to Tibbetts Valley Park and or other areas. But we're not capturing that, and that should be a foundational element.
So I'm going to ask you to hang on to that.
Oh,
Green Necklace is question 1B. Because there were some other comments about the Green Necklace. So I think we're going to deal with it specifically next, once we kind of get the other story comments. So hang on to that, Ken. All right. PPC or task force, any other comments here before we give the public an opportunity to say what they short, concise comments about the story?
From a storytelling standpoint, if you're going to show this picture with a bunch of colors, make
Yes.
sure those colors either have meaning or a legend or don't have colors.
And
So
I
I'm wondering why there's different shades of red.
And I added a note that those colors should include green for all the existing parks and open spaces that are in that central area, so that that's known and it becomes clear that they're part of what this green necklace will become. So that the green should be shown.
I was just lazy and used a zoning map, but I don't disagree with you,
I know,
AJ.
yeah, I think for a draft, I think that's fine, but I think for the final.
So, do you have a preference on, should it show anything or just geography?
I would rather. I think I would rather go with geography or a picture like the one behind
Aerial,
you.
yeah.
I wouldn't show zoning because zoning is a derivative of the visions. You don't want to start the vision with zonings.
I agree, I think, but I think it should show the
Okay,
neighborhoods.
maybe so. I think that's probably best.
I think it should definitely show the neighborhoods because they're referenced throughout the document, and I don't think people would necessarily know where the boundaries would be unless that was at least on there.
One more quick one. I'm going to go back to what Lindsay pointed out in her first comment. And if you look at the second from the bottom paragraph, page 17, which is capturing this story, that sentence says, finally, growth must not just fit in with our existing community, it must make it better and not be a detriment to the existing residents and businesses that exist within and adjacent to Central Issaquah. That shouldn't be a finally. That should be right up front. That should be the introductory paragraph, which might say something like, Issaquah will grow over the next 30 years per the visions outlined in this plan. However, growth must not just fit in with our existing blah, blah, blah. I would put that right up front. And then again, that again is telling our existing residents, we care about you and we don't want to lose the character and quality of life in our community. We want to make it better even as we grow. And that statement is really well done right there.
Would it be helpful to even lean into it even more and use language like we're going to harness growth to improve? So it's not simply that, okay, we've got growth coming, let's fit it and make it better. It's, okay, we've got growth coming, let's take advantage of the fact that these particular districts are going to grow to facilitate a better neighborhood and a better city. So you use some language around harness and capture, because I think a lot of the not deliverables, a lot of the measures, city implementation actions and measures of success, the city's only going to be able to do that either because A, they're working with a particular development as it occurs, or B, is going to be harnessing the extra money that's coming in through that. So I think taking that paragraph as an opportunity to make very clear that a lot of these things we're going to achieve not simply because we're growing, but we're actually going to be, I'm not saying that right. It's not simply, we're not doing this reacting to growth, we're actually going to be able to do it because we're growing. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's spinning it a little bit positive, like a little bit more positive and kind of turning the arrow the other direction while still keeping them connected but having it flow the other way. Maybe that was a little too flowery, but. And then, not to nitpick, but then the exact following sentence, it's semicolon, comma, after occupancy, period. So this is true during construction and after occupancy. That sentence doesn't make any sense. So the one that Rick, correct, just read. So the second to last paragraph on page 17. So he read the first two sentences, or the first sentence, and then the second sentence, which he didn't read. I think it's missing a bunch of words.
Really?
Yeah, this is true during construction and after occupancy. Does that make sense to other people?
So you want growth to fit in both during construction, because construction can be a big impact to adjacent occupied uses, right? And then after it's done and people are living there or people are working there, you want it to fit in with whatever happens to be adjacent to or nearby, right? So I think you're trying to address that fit piece both during construction, because that can be a big impact to a neighborhood, but also after it's done.
Okay.
I'd like to add, I think there's one other aspect that we're missing within these 4 subsets, and that is our parks and our streams. We have fish-bearing streams, and so there's a conversation that we should make sure that a certain percentage of our streams continue to have fish in them and accessible to parks. So we're not emphasizing enough in parks within these 4 bullet points. Because isn't that kind of that's what people think right now of Issaquah, is we have all these parks and we want to focus on these parks, but we're not putting that language in this vision strongly enough or frequently enough.
Yeah, and that's what I had given feedback before the last meeting, that I thought in the environmental section, we really needed to talk about wildlife corridors, which could easily end up along the streams. But that needed to be part of that, because the whole reason we got into this also central area plan is we didn't want a bunch of parking lots. You know, we wanted to try and make more pervious surface throughout the valley floor as we grew too, and not, have all these vast amounts of parking lots. So under the environmental, I would like to see wildlife corridors and passive open space as added there.
Is that in the question that is on, are we getting off track a little bit to put all these things in it?
Question 1A.
Yeah, at the story level.
Well, it's starting the story.
This is the plan. I mean, I thought it was part of those pages. It's on page 2. So, of my page 2.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I think that was just a question for Keith. Like, are we starting to bring up stuff that we should save for a later slide?
If we keep getting off track, we're not going to get it, all of those comments are important and should be added. I mean, I think you guys are on the right track, but I think we need to just go through this and then.
Well, I was actually mentioning the park piece because the parks are really important to us, and it's not even mentioned in the first 4 bullet points here, which is really this question.
Okay.
That's why. And that's those are our jewels. Those are our park space. And we're kind of avoiding that.
I don't think that the community is going to understand exactly what this plan does unless they can see something. This language, I think, is awesome. I think it's creative, and it means, taking it at face value, it creates a perfect place. But I think if I was just a normal, wasn't looking at this, and just lived in South Cove, I would think, well, gee, that's really nice, but it doesn't affect me because I can't see what it's going to be. It says it's going to be perfect, but I can't see that there's going to be parks around and that stuff. So I think that the first part is I think the story is fine with a few little comments and additions.
So I'm gonna just put the fish on the sideboard. I don't disagree that fish are important to Issaquah. I'm not sure that they had a space in the original plan called out. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I just don't know where to stick it right now. So I wrote fish. I'm not losing it.
I was there when we talked about it, but it never got put in the final.
Well, I think I just want to bring up, the fish are actually a really important piece, because as we develop and grow and these districts expand and the population explodes, this town is about fish. It's our icon. And we have the fish hatchery. Well, if we have so much growth and so much density and we're missing the the stream development and protecting those streams to make sure that they are fish-bearing, and maybe having controls on growth to ensure that they are going to continue to be fish-bearing.
I concur with Mary that I think wildlife corridors really need to be established in the environment, and so before moving on to the green necklace, I think it's important to talk about that as an actual value. I think fish are included in that, and I think it's better to have a broader spectrum of wildlife because it's not just the iconic image that we have, it's about how we live and interact in our space, and I think that it's better to talk about wildlife corridors as something that's an actual physical space, as we all know it is, and it's something that's shrinking and vital to maintaining our character. So having a little more broader language about that in the environment section, I think, is very important.
I don't want to derail this conversation, but I think I disagree. This is central, maybe I'm thinking too much central, like the growth district, but this is supposed to be like a dense, walkable, vibrant urban neighborhood. There's not going to be like deer and raccoons walking.
3 meetings ago, I saw a black bear, not 2 blocks from here.
No,
They're members of our community that I think that even though we're not saying we're prioritizing them above or instead of growth, I just think that there's something that should be included since we especially have an environment section. It's not like we have to create a special wildlife area for them. It's already laid out for us right into environment, so that's why.
I'm still not buying. I think for the city of Issaquah, absolutely wildlife corridors are incredibly important to make sure animals can move between the different hill parks into the lake and back. Not, but specifically for central Issaquah, I don't think that makes any sense.
Here's the problem I see, and that is if we focus on the core, guess where all the streams go through? The core. So if we create a core that is not fish habitat friendly, we're not going to have a fish hatchery. We're not going to have salmon coming up our streams.
No one is saying we repealed state law that'll protect the streams. The streams will be fine. I don't think we need to be building anything above and beyond what's basic.
We need to make sure that there are controls that the development isn't going to move the fish away.
I don't think we're quite there, Ron, but I do think we're just talking about story right now, and I think some of us think that's an important part of our story. So to get back to 1A.
And just as a reminder, and you're right, you are talking about just the story and getting it in the story piece, but there is a goal and 6 policies that talk specifically about the riparian corridor, the wildlife corridor, protecting the streams. So that's in the plan itself, but yes, if it may need to be mentioned up front as well.
So we can just add fish?
I've got wildlife.
The natural.
We will add to the environment section.
There is a point in time where we can make the rules and regulations, but not here.
This is not the place for rules. But so okay, I'm going to pivot and give the public an opportunity to give a brief comments on this section, just the story part of the districts. For those that came in late, Steve and John, if you guys want to come up to the table, you're welcome to. We're not going to walk up and back, but Steve, the reason is we're going to talk about these things one at a time, and at the end, it's going to be probably a little late for public comment. So we're going to weave the public comment in during the conversation. So if you want, come up. And I'm going to let Connie go first if she wants.
Sure. I think we need a number 4 under the reasons why this community conversation. I think one of the problems is there was no linkage between the vision and the implementation. So I think we need to strengthen the linkage between the two, and we can use these district visions as that tool. Because number 3 just says we're going to describe them. I think we need to go beyond that and then say, and this is how we're going to use those descriptions. I think the environment would fit nicely into an increased description under sustainability, because I think the sustainability is a little thin and could be expanded, but I also agree that this whole big first description of those 4 characteristics could be collapsed into the cool little charts with the colors, because you're repeating it a few times, and I think it would be easier to understand for people as they go through. I agree with the majority of what everybody else is saying and support that. So that's it.
David?
Thank you. I think, strengthening vision to reality. If we just have the vision, we're still going to get gateway projects. That would be a concern I have. Green necklace.
Next. We're not there yet.
Okay.
We really will do that next, promise.
That's a big one.
I also want to make a comment. You don't have to comment if you don't want to. Okay, it's not a requirement. Steve, did you want to say anything?
Hi, Steve Pereira. Sorry, thanks for being late. Or I'm sorry for being late. Keith, thanks for setting the stage for me to make sure I didn't ramble too far. I agree with a lot of the comments that I heard as far as I'm concerned we're going to lose a part of those characteristics of what those 10 neighborhoods were by dissolving them down to 4 by not talking about those things. I'd like Connie's comment on increasing the linkage between our storytelling and how we're going to make that happen. We're going to lose some things otherwise, and we need verbiage and code that talks about making those things happen.
Steve, we're going
I know. So I'm not going to go back, and I have things to say on the environment. I'm going to set those aside for now and not talk about those. That's why I appreciated Keith setting the stage for what we were doing. I'll reserve my other comments for present.
Okay, so here we go. Question 1B. So before I flip the slide, I'm going to talk for a second. So right now, there was comment about, there's been reoccurring comment about the green necklace, and the green necklace is there's kind of a broadly diagrammed map in the plan, and there wasn't really, and so what we tried to do was to encompass a better description of what the green necklace is intended to be, and that's what's in this paragraph. And what we heard on some early comments back on this version was, yeah, but we need a map. We all love maps. And so we went ahead and did a stab at a map. And I think, so the question's going to be, does the map help, or does the map actually take us in the wrong direction? And we need to have a very open conversation about the map.
It's a necklace.
So the graphic, so we can work on the graphic. The question is, does it help to have a graphic? And if so, we'll work on the graphic, having some comments on how to make the graphic read a little bit better. But this was an attack by staff to try and translate the paragraph into something more imageable. Now, in some ways, that's good, and in some ways, it takes out kind of that image your necklace was, and you might be disappointed, or you might be super thrilled. So I'm going to stop talking. Is this helpful or not? And if it's helpful, how do we make it as helpful as it can be if this particular image isn't what y'all had in mind?
So I think it's helpful.
Okay.
It needs to be a little more accurate. For example, where you've got Pickering Barn and Darst Park and all that, that's where you would route the green necklace, not over there on the East Lake Sammamish Trail. So you'd want to...
So this section right here, Ken, needs to migrate to the southwest.
Yeah.
And run along this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And connect over to Confluence Park, and then Maple Juniper Trail over to Tibbetts Valley Park. Should probably show a connector to Tiger Mountain and Squawk Mountain. Just a hypothetical connector like you do to Cougar. Same thing for Squawk and Tiger. But you're capturing the essence, which is the Green Necklace was envisioned to route along the Tibbetts Creek corridor through Lake Sammamish State Park, back up through the Issaquah Creek corridor, and the missing link is only between Tibbetts Valley Park and over to probably Confluence Park and/or wherever else we want to have linkages to that section, and then connections to the outer green of Cougar, Squawk, Tiger, and the regional trails like East Lake Sammamish Trail, High Point Trail, and the I-90 Trail. If you could capture that, the diagram, some conceptual diagram like that, I think is very helpful. And I would add the verbiage, though. The verbiage about the Green Necklace needs to be right up front in the story and as a priority of what the Central Issaquah Plan is all about. Its foundation was that even as we grow and turn into an urban center, we're going to ensure nature at the doorstep of every person, which also allows for commuting and access to transit and walkable shopping and all sorts of things, but access to nature on an inner and an outer Green Necklace. That was the concept.
Would we want to add more connectivity based on ST3 coming? More accessibility? So if ST3, assuming that the light rail is going to be under 90, would we want to add more connectors to that area? And do we want to go all the way up to supposedly a train station?
No, I don't think the train station belongs on this map.
I think there's two things, and I would distinguish between them. One is the Green Necklace, which is that nature at your doorstep opportunity. And I think parts of that may be part of the commuter network, but not necessarily the same thing. And what you're getting at is the commuter network of ped and bike facilities that may be part of this, but maybe also separate from what the Green Necklace actually is.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
Yeah.
You could have sections which would be shared.
Yeah.
So is it planning to have a path all the way around there? Or are we going to have pockets of parks? So it's going to be a path all the way, a connecting path.
Connected network of paths. It could be as wide as a path. It could be as wide as Confluence Park. It's connections between all the green spaces, which might be large,
Right.
but where you can't have the large spaces, then you have a path that connects them all. The concept being much like the Mountains to Sound Greenway, which in Seattle is nothing more than an urban trail in many places, but that connects you out to the broader mountain network of trails. And this is connections of open space, Tibbetts Valley Park, Confluence Park, Pickering Barn and Darce Park, all those areas, but then connecting them all by a trail that allows people to flow between all of those.
I just like more specifics on where that trail's going to go.
Well, so
That's my
what I was
problem
going to
with
say.
that.
And I think there's a map in the Central Issaquah Plan already that's Exhibit 7, page 43, that details exactly where the proposed routes for urban shared path, proposed new parks, regional routes, things like that. I think that level of detail is important, but also to be able to do some of the scale here that talks about connecting out to Cougar Mountain and the High Point Trail. But I think the details there are what are going to be very important.
And what map was that again?
So it's in the Central Issaquah Plan, Exhibit 7, page 43.
Thank you.
So that map is absolutely a critical part of the plan.
Right.
I like that the vision is a slight abstraction away from that. You need both. We need the detailed plan with detailed deliverables and.
But you want the elevator. You want the image that's simple enough that people go, okay, the Green Necklace. It's this thing that loops around. It follows the creek, and it's got these spurs that go off to the green hillsides around. And then there's also these spurs that head towards the center, which actually ends up being the train station, like it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Keith, I'll be the bad guy and answer answer to your question. I think we absolutely need a graphic, and I absolutely don't like this graphic, and I would encourage a visualization that's more like a spider web that I think might encourage a little bit more of an interconnectedness and a running through the community rather than this kind of faux peace symbol. I'm not crazy about this graphic.
I agree. Mostly, I like that we still have the necklace so it fits with the branding, but I do think whatever they end up being, if they're little green circles, not only should they be coming out, but you should be able to get between the 4 boxes, just to show that it connects internally.
Yeah, the best suggestion I can give is more like a spider web to try to give you a little more of a design aspect. But
So we've been, so there's been green web, green green necklace, green net,
Lantern.
So I think we can stick with the same name, even if the image actually ends
yeah,
up
I
being
think
a
the
green
necklace
spider web.
adorns our community.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to
necklace.
actually look like a string of green pearls.
I hear you. So what I heard was that there should show some connectivity internal to this because that it's going to be that way anyway. So
And it'll make it feel more like it is a part of our community. It runs throughout it, much like our streams, rather than it feeling like, and then we have a loop, you know? Yeah.
So in a number of our meetings, we've discussed the green necklace, and I think that this is very helpful because I hadn't actually thought of it this way before, and so I do think that it is very helpful, but I agree that it's kind of like a cartoon on top of a realistic map, and I think that since we have these green spaces there, you could do just more of an overlay so you could see through the green necklace type area, so some sort of translucency and a little less of the cartoony mix. That would be my recommendation, but I do think it is helpful to see it this way.
But then it won't look like a necklace.
It can be smaller pearls or emeralds. I got to throw this in because this is such a priority to me that I actually met with Jeff Watling, the Parks Director, today specifically to ask about this and where Parks Department is in defining the route and all that. We had a very good discussion, and I'm not gonna quote Jeff or put him on the spot, but I'd say that I would be confident that the Parks Department, perhaps working with Issaquah Alps Trails Club, Cascade Bike Club, and all these other groups, could within 6 months define the desired specific route of what the green necklace would be that connects all these open spaces. So that's the time frame we're talking about to go from cartoon to a real plan. And that's what, Jeff is all for that too, I think. I'm not going to quote him or try to put him on the spot. I'm surmising that Jeff is for that, and I'm certainly for that, and think that's where we got to go, is get to a specific detailed route and plan that guides us, or it's never going to happen. As each parcel develops, we'll lose that opportunity that we needed. So it's got to be down to a parcel level as to where that route's going to go.
Can I throw something out there? So I think the map is great, and I love it. It's what the people demand. We gotta get the people what they want. But would it be also useful to actually use this exact framework? So today, future, the 4 boxes, and then the action items and measure success, and have a full page on the green necklace? And so this picture could be a quarter of the real estate, but so you have 4 pages, 1 for each district. Would also be helpful to have a green necklace page that ends up having the exact same sections.
I think at the very minimum, being able to say today what's missing and the vision of it, because that was one thing that council definitely mentioned in their meetings was, okay, but how specifically do we get there? What's missing? And so if we indicate on there, this central Issaquah area is missing those 24/7 gathering places, and we have a few connectivity points here that are needed, that gives us an implementation plan.
So I think this delivers the content that everyone's asking for, but I think stylistically, by having it actually end up looking the same, it shows that the green necklace is co-equal with the 4-district visions.
And going beyond just the districts, I like your lingo of going districts and neighborhoods, so I want to keep that. So going beyond the districts and keeping us and following this and going with the sustainability, the things that we valued, and being able to having that space to detail out. The same way that we say our story's nice, but it doesn't say everything we want to say. If we have this layout, then we're able to go into more of the nitty-gritty for environment, for livability, and those tenets that we find to be important, just like we do the districts.
But instead of having just this one paragraph,
Right. I like this idea of having this layout, the way that we have this. I think that's a great suggestion.
So until Ken works and gets it all put together, would it help that particular map just making it, I want to say bigger, but still the same size, but show a little more detail on the underneath part so that people can get a little bit better idea of where it is going? I mean, you can keep the same map, only stretch the bottom, and so people can get a better idea of that. And then come in with the rest of the fill-in.
Okay. All right, public?
Okay. I'm not on there's a couple of spokes missing. The city has put a lot of money into connecting Lake Sammamish State Park with the east side of Squaw Mountain using Issaquah Creek Corridor, and that needs to be reflected. We're also, the Silverado Plat and some of these others, plus the county acquisitions, are working on the west side of Squaw to connect Tibbetts Valley Park to the west side of Squaw and the city open space they have on Squaw, and just across to all the city open space on Cougar. So there needs to be some of those more outward spokes going on for sure. But we need a much more defined map eventually, to be fair to a developer, so they know that this is coming at them, that they can plan for that. Hopefully they see it as an amenity and plan it into their project, rather than doing a project and then find out they're trying to force this on them and it screws up their project. So we want people to see this as an amenity to their development and useful and a real asset, and that they're part of this, and that's got to get down on the ground more defined, rather than a threat overhanging them that they don't know where it's going to come.
So there's connectivity, and then there's green necklace, and then there's some places where connectivity is the green necklace, and so I see them laid on top of each other. And so if you're going to do a call-out sheet, for example, for the green necklace, I think we also need a call-out sheet for connectivity and what things are missing and what we need for connectivity in each neighborhood. But those are sort of overarching all over the central Issaquah plan. So I think we have some topics that are within neighborhoods and some topics that are overarching. And this is one that I call overarching. I think it needs to be a net or a mesh or a web, because I think every neighborhood should feel like it is a part of the green necklace, and it should be connected to whatever the largest parks are. And then within each one, we have expectations of the developers also creating little bits of the green necklace. And so we have to have some method of getting them to put their appropriate private parks in to augment the public parks that are likely to be larger, and then figuring it out how the trails will connect them all together. And in this conversation tonight, I don't get a sensation that that is occurring. I get the feeling that we're still looking at these blobs saying, well, this is enough. I think it has to be entirely controlled and put together and scheduled. Now, how to do that, what is written here doesn't even attempt that, because remember, the Parks Department still has to come out with their parks plan. One thing I was thinking is perhaps the trails that are existing would be a decent base for being underneath this map. So then at least we could see what we already have, and we might be able to understand better what we need for the connectivity. Thanks.
So I looked at this, and I guess I like this map from the standpoint it really does make a true statement of what the green necklace that everybody's talking about. To me, I didn't picture a green necklace just to be a place of connectivity between different places you could go to, but that Issaquah would retain some of its character and charm as far as being a wooded small town feel, and that's built in to who we are as a people, and it's maintaining it more than just as a thing on the fringe or a connection to get to, but it's retaining parks, it's retaining open space, it's retaining and protecting streams, it's protecting salmon, it's protecting riparian and bird and wildlife corridors. We haven't captured that in either our story or in our document, and I think that needs to be part of who we are. If we don't talk about it, we're not going to have it come true. We're going to 20 years down the road and say we don't have salmon bearing streams anymore. We don't have wildlife corridors. The deer that we see, the pictures we see on Nextdoor where, a bear or a cougar aren't going to happen because we haven't talked about those as part of our story. We've just talked about a green, delicate, breakable necklace.
Any final thoughts before I move? All right. So we're going to get to maybe some easier questions here. So question number 2, should the service district be removed from central Issaquah? So service is down here. Does that show up okay? Yep. Okay. North side of 90. Kind of south end of the city. This is the area with the RV park and city shop and other things. And so, yes, no, don't know?
Yes.
Yes. Are there any specific rules already in place that governs that area?
What kind of rules would you be?
What can be built, types of businesses, so that's already in plan.
Yeah, so what would happen is if we take it out, there's zoning on the property now. Most of those properties are zoned intensive commercial, which allows things like auto shops and manufacturing, and it's kind of our little manufacturing kind of neighborhood that we have in the city, which is super important from a business standpoint. But there are standards that apply outside of central Issaquah if we take it out. What would happen is, as a follow-up, if you guys decide to take it out, what we will do in 2018 is we'll send out basically a notice to property owners that their standards are going to change. And that'll give them an opportunity to come to a PPC hearing where they could say that doesn't work for them or that's fine or whatever. So basically it's more about things like setbacks and building heights than it is about land uses. That's what's different. Central Issaquah allows for more dense development than what would happen if we take it out. Did that answer your question, Joan? Okay.
I just want to make sure there is some governing body
Yes.
that takes
We have
care of
rules.
what's going to be developed there.
They're not as good, but we have rules.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it being dropped from the vision as long as we're still going to have a standalone decision point where we actually think through the ramifications of it being in central Issaquah from a legal zoning perspective versus not. And so I think it sounds like what you're saying is yes, we will.
There's a follow-up code action, yes.
But that's what I'm saying. I think I'm just voicing I want to make sure
Yes.
that code action
Where the
will-
public gets an opportunity to weigh in on that, other than this public here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the commission gets to think about it and make sure, okay, cool, that makes sense.
Yes.
All right.
So the task force struggled with that district too, and not sure what it should be or could be, but one thought was kind of an incubator area for new startups. Think of Issaquah 30 years from now. It's a desirable place. The next Apple might well found itself in Issaquah, for all we know. And maybe that's a place where that could be. And if that can happen without being in the central Issaquah plan, I'm okay with it. I'm just nervous about what might happen if it's not in the plan, and we don't want to lose that. That's now the eastern gateway to Issaquah. I saw what happened to the western gateway, and I'm not happy about that. So let's not lose the eastern gateway, and in fact, we could turn that as an eastern gateway into something very nice. When that RV park moves out and other things, it could become a grand entryway to Issaquah as you come out of the Issaquah Alps and out of the mountains to Sound Greenway, right into the heart of Issaquah. What do we want that area to be is the first thing people see. That's how I look at that. So if we can manage that without it being in the Central Issaquah plan, okay, but if it's better to manage it by having that in the plan, then that's something we need to consider.
There's still a citywide vision statement and all that fun stuff, and so I think everything we're trying to accomplish with that neighborhood, we can cover at a citywide level as opposed to a Central Issaquah level.
Public? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
The RV park is completely owned by the city, right?
Yep.
Yep. And it's also our zone for adult entertainment and marijuana stores, right?
Yep.
So, and that's where we've decided to put those things we don't want anywhere else.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean we want to, we want it to have some class too, so. Good luck.
Connie, do you have anything for this one? Steve, anything for this?
So I think this is also the property where the mobile home park?
Yes.
Okay, I take it just from the stake of an affordable housing piece of unit. I want to make sure that doesn't get overwhelmed by possible development and can be carried forward.
Okay.
Just to be clear, did anybody else want to make a comment on yes or no? Do you want to? Yes. Oh,
Thumbs up.
yes, yes.
Okay. Next, Old Route 10, same question. So Old Route 10 is southern part, eastern part, south of I-90. It's where XXX and Bohm's and the Grange happen to live. And as we talked about that one, I think that, again, things that I heard were that neighborhood seems to feel more like Old Town than it does Central Issaquah. So maybe that should be its resting spot.
So again, if you combine the two,
You
What?
need to be plugged in, Joan.
what,
Sorry.
I have two together and how will the rules that the codes that have already been accepted for Old Town, how will it apply to that?
We actually have, so we're in the process now of updating the Old Town Plan. And so if the commission decides that Old Route 10 really feels more like Old Town or doesn't feel so much like Central Issaquah, we take it out of Central Issaquah. The Old Town Plan still has to come back. We brought it to you guys a long time ago, and it has changed about as much as the visions have changed. So you're going to get another whack at it. And so by then, which will probably be January or February of next year, we will know whether this has come out of Central Issaquah, and then a whole conversation that we will have is, should we now change the boundary for Old Town to include Old Route 10 into Old Town? So that's the way that will play out if ultimately you guys want to take it out of Central Issaquah, and the council agrees.
Just thinking of what Old Town is going to be, the type of housing that's going to go in there. We have talked about the roof slants and all this other stuff. How will that actually affect 10, Old Route 10, if you combine the two? I mean, we heard last time might be a barn in there, different kinds of things that might be going on there that would be affected by rules that would be governing Old Town.
Right. So obviously, when we put the latest version of the plan update together, we weren't envisioning adding this area. So if that is indeed the outcome, then I think we as staff, and I'm looking at Kristen because Dave's not in the room, we need to go back and look at that and think about that, and probably work on some language for that. Like this, it's going to be planned first and standard second. So if we include Old Route 10 in Old Town, then that's changing maps, that's adding some policies potentially to talk about that area. But then we have to look at, okay, what kind of code now would we want to potentially put in place that would be specific to the Old Route 10 part of Old Town? Because we have, like, if you remember, we have specific code language related to, like, say, Front Streets. That's what we call the cultural business district. It has specific code related to it that's different than Sunset, right? So it would be like adding kind of another layer for Old Route 10, potentially. I think we'd have to talk through that, and we as staff haven't even started that conversation yet because we're trying to get visions done. So
It's something that needs.
it will get, if that's what we want to do, we will definitely put the time into it, and then you guys will get that first, probably in February-ish.
And our next meeting, I believe, December 14th, are we going to be starting to go over that?
No. Yeah, we were.
But I'm not incorrect that was what was sent out was, okay.
It was. We were hoping to be done with conversations at Land and Shore so that then we could come back to PPC. But Land and Shore has been busy with other things, so it got kicked to next year.
Next year, okay.
Yeah.
So, any comments on this?
Yes, I've said, I think I'm okay with moving some of Old Route 10 either to Old Town or just to neither. But if we do that, I don't think the borders as drawn are best.
We're going to have that conversation separately.
Okay, yeah. Yes, okay.
I
yeah,
anticipated, so we've got actually a are the borders in the right place conversation coming up. So hang on to that thought.
Okay.
I think it's better to take it out. It does not fit with the character of what we're talking about with the rest of the Central Issaquah plan, and I see great potential for the Grange with their barn and homes and whatever other XXX root beer and their car shows. All that is a fun, kind of funky, a Belltown kind of area of Issaquah maybe in the future. And that's what it should be. It doesn't need to be high-rise condos and all that. It should be funky old Issaquah.
That's what you originally imagined it to be, the 1950s kind of thing. And so that's kind of, in my mind, that's what it's always been.
Yeah.
Okay, so, sorry, Mary.
Destination is what we saw. I mean, not only for local, but destination. And with all the trail connections coming down, it's the locals can ride their bikes down or to it, but also people can come and take transit and their bikes and ride or walk up into Tiger Mountain and into the other parks. But let it be a destination area.
So if anybody wanted to put in a nice restaurant that catered to bikers, that would be a perfect place for it.
Right.
Bicycles. Not bike.
Yeah, John, you're going to want to talk. I know that. So first, let's get to the folks at the table. Connie, Dave, Steve.
So I'm admittedly a huge proponent of removing it from the Central Issaquah plan. I'd like to make sure it's down zoned so we don't, because real estate prices, lose Bohm's and Grange and XXX. I think those are heritage places. I think this is the last XXX that remains in the chain. Those would be, sorry to lose, it's still zoned for, is it 25 mile an hour, or there's no speed zone posted, which means 25 miles an hour zone. It feels very much like a part of Old Town. Whether that you map the same coding in, I'm open to that discussion, but it doesn't belong as part of the Central Issaquah plan and needs to retain its kind of current look and feel. Thanks.
John, you want to come up?
Sure.
You're welcome to come up here.
Thank you very much. That's okay.
Thanks, Ken.
I'm John Mavitt, and I run the Grange, I've talked this over with folks at the store and folks on the board, and of course, we've been around since 43, and Bohm's been around a long time, and of course the Dairy Gold there, and I think that, I think we got to make us more part of Old Town. And what's interesting that's come up is sort of this idea of an Old Town loop where you can come through downtown, take the right on Gilman there, and then come back around. So you actually can kind of see Old Town. And the Grange, at least as long as I'm there, what we're doing virtually every few months is trying to do something to increase our curb appeal. So Cenex has come out and redone the fuel island, and we're actually going to paint a mural on the big long fence that is there. We're going to knock out the windows so that we actually look more like a storefront than like a gulag. And again, we're going to put a barn sort of in the back on the left, I think is where it's going to wind up, and in that barn we're going to do some classes and dances. But we've actually, as a real community resource, we've knocked out a wall in our conference room and made it about 40% bigger because our classes have become kind of overwhelmingly large. And then, I mean, just so that you know, we did a Community Appreciation Day. I'm not sure if any of you all were there in the middle of the summer, and there must have been 1,000 people showed up. We changed it from Customer Appreciation Day because that's confining, and we made it a Community Appreciation Day, and the diversity and the age difference of the folks there was terrific. So I think, when you think about Old Town, I guess what I'd ask you to consider and remember is that, not only the Grange has been there a long time, but we really are concentrating on being compelling and necessary and important in the community. So I love Old Town. I mean, that's where I did all my Christmas shopping last year, and that's where I'm going to do it this year. And I think that most of the folks that I talk to that shop there and on the board would like to be more part of that.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
If you kept it into Old Town, where would the connection be?
Well, so we'd have to talk about that, right? I mean, we'd have to talk about, whether you extended it from the south to include that, or whether and I'm talking about plan connection and not any kind of mobility connection. If you're going to grab that area and bring it into Old Town, we talked about Staples and bringing that in, which is now Lazy Boy, and so we've got to revisit those conversations about if you're going to bring this area that makes sense into Old Town, what area that's next to it that maybe we've already decided wasn't part of Old Town is going to get sucked in as part of that process. So I think we'd have to look at that, Joan. I don't think tonight we would want to spend too much time on that.
No, I think that it's going to be very difficult to find an area that hasn't been built on to have an easy flow-through access. And if you're going to call it Old Town, you're going to have it connected to Old Town.
But I think that's kind of the same thing we did when we were trying to bolt together Tibbetts Valley and Pickering, even though they're clearly divided right now. From a vision standpoint, we want it to be one thing. It's kind of the same thing with Old Route 10. Right now, it doesn't really flow to the rest of Old Town, but from a vision standpoint, let's connect them, and then that means we then need to figure out how to implement the connection.
So you have
to start with the vision.
That idea of the RGC being one neighborhood or two, we still have to have that conversation.
Sure.
I would like to make one last
Just
comment.
wanted to put that out there on public record. Yes,
I want to
sir.
make one last comment about the old Route 10. And if we do make it bring it into the boundaries of Old Town, I think it needs to be a subset with its own codes unique to that area, because with XXX, the Grange, I think that area could be so much more than what it is today with the right improvements, the right enhancements, and still take the attributes of Old Town. But with the Grange, those are really kind of jewels, and we're not maximizing its potential. It doesn't need to be a two-lane road for one. It could be, a smaller two-lane road, and we give that real estate back to the businesses, or put in parks or something of that sort to enhance and expand their businesses, right? But I don't I think if it's going to be part of Old Town, it should be a subset of Old Town, but definitely not part of the Central Issaquah plan.
Okay, question 4. This is, and if you've gotten the theme of these questions, it's should areas be in Central Issaquah or out? So this area down, and to give you guys kind of the lay of the land. So this area we titled Confluence Neighborhood because it's kind of the confluence between Central Issaquah and Old Town. But it's, and it's right next to Confluence Park, and so here's this big white thing. This is Safeway REI right here. So it's basically south of Locust. It runs over, picks up kind of that area that's on the.
That's where that new apartment building's going to be?
Yeah, it's called Inniswood. I was trying to figure out what direction. I guess that's west.
West, yes.
The west side of Newport, and then runs down to kind of to Hawley. And so this area is, we drove through it. I made a left onto Gilman from Juniper at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, which in a van, which was interesting. So but it's a mix of uses. There's residential, there is some commercial, there's like some, I think there's places that offer like music lessons and things. There's, you've got some senior housing and assisted living in there. It's a real kind of mix of stuff. And so I think the question is, it definitely has a different flavor than some of the other neighborhoods in Central Issaquah. I think we've talked about that maybe that's okay. Maybe that's important to have areas of different, character. But I think the question is, I have heard at least somebody suggest that maybe this area should be taken out of Central Issaquah.
I would agree, 100%. It does not belong in the Central Issaquah plan.
Where is Gilman Village in that? Is that in the area?
It's in East Valley, actually, so I think it's right here. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Is there any way to make it bigger? You can see more specific.
Make it bigger. Not where I am. I could get out and get onto something else to make it bigger if I needed to.
Exit there and then just.
I know I'd have. You want me to see if.
Do the view.
Well, it's just hard to actually see.
Zoom in.
Controls.
Yeah, then use your zoom at the bottom right.
Look at that.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's
You're
going
doing
to
a
be
great job, Keith.
Yep.
Keep going.
legible. Look at that!
A
Wow.
little bit to the right.
Nice. Oops.
No, you're
Other
right.
way.
Sorry. You guys good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Alice is here. This is Vale. It's under construction right now. Basically 7th and Locust. Inniswood's over here under the green fuzz. You've got Bernston Park and Salmon Run Park kind of in the middle of this neighborhood. Confluence is down here.
All part of the green necklace.
So I heard one out.
Why would we not have Gilman Village in part of that?
Gilman Village right now is in the East Valley neighborhood. We're going to talk about the boundaries later. So where Gilman Village lands can be a conversation we'll have.
So I think this is great. I like the idea of having it a part of the Central Issaquah, but not part of the growth center in the East Valley, because those are a lot more denser, a lot more urban. I really like this functioning as a transition neighborhood that has aspects of Central Issaquah, which is denser and more urban than the rest of Issaquah, but not as dense and urban as the growth center in East Valley. So I think the idea of having this neighborhood very much transitioning from the growth center to Old Town, I think is fantastic. I think it makes sense as a district, especially with the Confluence Park as kind of your placemaking neighborhood. I think that there's a lot to like about one, including it, and two, that this specific district as visioned.
I agree. I keep it in.
Well, I know I attended the district meetings that we held, and the citizens, the residents that live there right now are very concerned with it staying in, because they really feel that, what's happened to their residential area with Inniswood and with Locust and with Atlas is just atrocious, because, they've got these tall buildings going in next to, two-story houses. And so they don't really think that those are fitting in with the character of their neighborhoods, especially right up next to a park. So unless this has, some zoning and codes that definitely change from what's gone on in there, I don't think the residents that live there feel that this should be part of the central area plan, because they don't feel like their existing homes are being protected or appreciated.
I agree with everything AJ said, so I won't repeat it all. I think he nailed it. But the only thing I'd add is this also serves a subset of the population that needs to have an area where they can live, that can walk to Old Town, walk to the school, that has dispersed housing, not all high rises. We don't want to lose that. That's part of historic Issaquah, and I think it does not need to be part of the central Issaquah plan either.
I think my concern is that right next to that and above it is the area that we've identified for mixed use. And in order to make that happen as a project, we need to know that there's going to be dense housing nearby. And so I would say it probably needs to be considered in the Central Issaquah plan as a way to have some of those projects there that could be transitionary.
I would completely agree with that. This is a 30-year plan, and somebody that's in a house now that's a single-family house that's been there for 30 years, the city's transitioning, and we can't protect single-family houses in the middle of an urban neighborhood. And you've got retail that's walking distance, hopefully more jobs would be walking distance. I would keep it in.
I guess I would.
Whoa.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of new homes that have gone in there in the last 5 years. There are a lot of older apartments that are the low affordable, and I think as those are redeveloped, there needs to be a redevelopment in attempting to keep those. But there is a tremendous number of new homes built that have been built there, single family. Yes, they're a little bit taller, and some of them may be 3-story single family, but that have gone in the last 5 years in that area. And you're talking $500,000 to $1 million homes. Those are the people that showed up at this meeting and said, we don't want another Atlas going in next door.
Maybe for this, because of those concerns, to address it, and I understand some of my other commissioners' comments, which also make sense from an economic vitality standpoint. Maybe this being a transition center, if it's not part of CIP, but as a transition boundary or transitional area, if we pull it out of CIP, then what would that vision look like? I mean, what kind of buildings would go in there? And if it's part of CIP, what kind of buildings would be there?
So that's a good question. I think you need to think about it in terms of two things. One is buildings, but also it's the what else we get in Central Issaquah. So Central Issaquah, it's not just about the density that you can build on each parcel. It's also that development is pedestrian oriented, that the streets are complete with pedestrian facilities and adequate bike considerations, whether they're bike lanes or something else. And so by having it in central Issaquah, this neighborhood is going to get the benefits of those things. You know, what we have here, and somebody mentioned it, and I apologize for not remembering who. So that's elementary school, right? That's currently the admin offices for the school district. So that's a new middle school. And so as we talk about, and I think we talked about it in the van a little bit, you know, this neighborhood, you know, it's got a great kind of funk associated with it because of the diversity of housing and things that are here. But it is truly walkable to a ton of stuff. You know, you can live in this neighborhood, walk to an elementary school, walk to your middle school, walk to a big city park, walk to Old Town, walk to Gilman Village, walk to Safeway, walk to REI. I mean, it's a great place, and it's kind of off the map for a lot of people. You know, they don't drive back through here because there's not a lot of reason to. You know, 7th is going to become a lot busier because of the amount of housing that's gone in with Atlas and once Vale's occupied, and so that is definitely going to impact, I think, this neighborhood a bit. But I think that so to answer your question, Ron, I think if it was outside central Issaquah, similar to Service and Old Town, what happens is the zoning's not going to change, I don't believe, and I'm looking at my zoning experts over there to tell me if I'm wrong, but the development standards will. So for example, building heights and FARs will be lower, and so there would be some more, you'd potentially scale in some of the stuff that's there now. But you also have, you know, in my mind, one of the reasons why this is off the map is parcels are really small. You know, the bigger parcels have already been, Vale was one of the bigger ones in this neighborhood, and we know what it is now. But to go in there and assemble a bunch of small lot housing to, you know, bulldoze it and build something else, that's hard. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but maybe to Mel's point, that might be 20 years from now and not 2 years from now. You know, as people are looking for redevelopment opportunities, if you have to, and take a page out of the school district, if you have to assemble a bunch of residential properties individually owned, that's going to be your last choice, as opposed to finding bigger parcels or things that are ready to go.
So Keith, to Ron's point too, he asked what kind of building would be built there. If it's not in central Issaquah, we have architectural standards that have just been adopted. And if it's not in central Issaquah, those don't apply.
Right.
So density, now let's talk about density for a moment. Density is actually unchanged because they are zoned today for X density. And all we're talking about is the codes to actually, the design standards.
Yeah, do you want to apply the CIP standards or not? This isn't a do we want to upzone or downzone question.
The density
It'll go
would go
down.
up.
Change?
It goes down
Because building heights are higher
currently.
in central Issaquah.
Oh, right, so if we actually make this part of the CIP, if this is part of the CIP, then the building heights go up and density goes up, or what you're saying is density goes down.
Right. If you remove it, building heights, impervious surface, those go down. And if you keep it in, they remain higher, the impervious surface and building heights.
Because it's in now.
Right.
So could you actually create kind of a combination area where you keep a toned-down version of the CIP here so that you have a lot of the amenities and the attributes of the CIP, but you don't have the taller buildings?
So you could, so sure. That's a zone change. That's a change to code, not visions. Now, I think in the vision, when we get to the vision, if you decide potentially you can reserve the right to have a conversation about Confluence later, but if ultimately we decide that the vision for this neighborhood should be lower scaled, you know, that could then also lead to a request to reduce the maximum building height. What is the maximum building height now?
Currently 65 feet.
So it could go from, 5 stories to 4, but that's a code change. That would happen after, based on, a recommendation that y'all might have about this neighborhood if you leave it in, or you leave it at, 65, which is really 5 stories, and say, you know what, at maybe 30 years from now, it should be 5 stories.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is as you look at the actual verbiage, it says things like small-scale redevelopment, then, distinctive 1.3, low to moderate density. So I think the language there is very much a clear peg down from other parts of Central Issaquah.
Any other comments?
Okay.
Any recommendation?
I think that it seems to feel similar to, it seems to fit into the Central Issaquah from a feel standpoint in my perspective, and it seems also to a lot of the vision statements as far as livability, sustainability. It's right next to this beautiful park and right next to schools and walkable, and to me it seems to already sort of be going in that direction to meet a lot of those livability aims, and so I think it's kind of going that direction already, and it is a transition, and it has small parcels, so it probably will go slower, but I think it feels like it fits in with Central Issaquah to me.
Public?
With the difference, with the verbiage that goes along with it, to ensure that there is a part of Central area that has a less dense, more family-oriented kind of feel to it. I'm fine with keeping it in.
If it is part of this, if we do decide to make it part of the CIP, I want to know why Gilman Village is not part of it. I know you said you're going to get to it.
We're talking about boundaries soon. All right, Steve.
It seems like, I hear the argument that it's a good part for CIP to apply to it because that's the walkability thing, denser. If you want to keep it as this transitional neighborhood, though, you have to not have it in CIP, or you have to have it in a separate code or separate way of talking about it. Otherwise, people are going to buy up those single homes piece by piece, and they're going to build something bigger. If you put it in the CIP, you're going to lose that. It's going to become a transitional. It's going to lose that current feel. That bothers me. So I would rather see it outside of the CIP or a separate piece. And I'll go with Ron's comment. I think Gilman Village needs to be part of that discussion as well.
Connie or David?
Yeah. So the Murr District, mixed-use residential is
I thought you said the murder district.
I don't think there's been one here. Just a little ways across the freeway, yes.
Sorry.
So the Murr District, mixed-use residential, those are the rules that got you what you have. And that is an intermediary zoning that's already within the city that provides mixed use, but not the big density. And so when you look at this parcel and you see the creek going down the center, you can see that a lot of this is the critical area that we're trying to protect. There's only a small slice that you would even want to consider in the high density that is the Central Issaquah plan. At this point in time, we don't have anything in our descriptive language that has ever changed the code ability for people to build the tall buildings. And so given what we have now, if you say this stays in, that still does not change that language. They still have the ability for that high density, no matter what the vision language says, unless the code is changed. Now, that gets to that. We need a better linkage between our vision and actuality, but I don't trust that yet. So if we could be very, very, very sure that that would change and that we would be able to enforce the vision to lower density or less density, I think this would be fine. I think we have 2 years before we can be very, very sure that that is true. And until that point in time, and seeing as how this is not going to be redeveloped quickly, I would prefer to keep it in the Murr, where you can get this great mixed-use residential, smaller lot, walkable feel without the threat of the density. Thanks.
It is a really a neat, interesting neighborhood. It's great to walk through there, go across Confluence Park and through there, and actually Atlas to Gilman, then you come back through Gilman Village and stuff, and you can really walk a lot and not have much noise or much traffic. It's going to get worse, admittedly, but we still want to screw that area up. It's pretty special, and I think a lot of retired people are gravitating there because they can get to things. They can ride a bike on the flat land. They got a grocery store, which we don't have in this end of town, and so it's got a lot of advantages. Just don't screw it up. I don't know.
Okay, wrote down, don't screw it up. All right. All right. AJ, should the Regional Growth Center be 1 or 2 neighborhoods?
1.
Whoa.
So can I? So look at that. So the key word there is neighborhoods. So I'm curious if we can do kind of get a both and have it be one district, but then in the district vision articulate multiple neighborhoods. So you'd still only get 1 page for the district to make it very clear that, for instance, the light rail station is supposed to be the pivot and the node for the entire district, but you can still have neighborhoods within that.
And when you say neighborhoods, you're talking about theme neighborhoods?
No, I'm talking about like placemaking. The idea that you would your zoning and your legal requirements would be the same, but the city would then refer to it and label things distinctly. So it's more of a nebulous placemaking.
Would you say that is 4 neighborhoods, 1 district? What would your vision look like? Because I hear where you're going, and I'm kind of on board with it, but
I see 3 neighborhoods. I don't really see why Highland and Tibbetts Valley need to be 2 separate ones, but that's more nitpicking. I mean, you kind of have 4 neighborhoods.
Development agreement.
What?
It's because of the development agreement.
But does the development agreement cross 900?
It does.
Highland.
It does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Raleigh Center's over here and Hyla's over here, and so the development agreement actually kind of grabs all of that area. I guess, so the number is, I don't disagree with kind of where you're going with that, AJ. I think the question is, would you then just split it north and south? So this would be 1 neighborhood on the north side, and then this would be a neighborhood on the south side. Or does SR 900, is it a big enough division that Hyla is separate from kind of this area over here?
it's a natural, well, not a natural, but it's a boundary.
It's a boundary.
But I think the question is our vision, not currency, but is our vision that boundary will be overcome, or will that boundary be a natural transition between neighborhoods? I think that's the question.
I think we should talk district before neighborhood, because I'm not sold either that it should be 1 district or a north and south district, because if you're looking at it, particularly if you look into the Costco development agreement that's in the Pickering area, they've identified quite a bit of extra area that they may want to expand into. And so if they do that, that really dominates that top area. And so that would create a clear differentiation between the north area, and then the south area would be more of the mixed use, residential, dense housing, that feel. So I think you could end up with 2 very different feels. The question is that our intention, or can we even control for that? And does that change how we choose them as districts?
And adding to that, Pickering, and getting back to the jobs piece, if we decide to make these the 1 district, 3 or 4 different neighborhoods, where are the jobs going to go? if we remove Pickering, right now, all the landlords have to be on board in an agreement before they can put any kind of residential there. But if we focus on Pickering and actually, and I originally thought that would be great to have that as mixed-use residential, but if we create that space to be our job center, then we can support the rest of our vision with having higher jobs so that the people who live here may actually be able to work here. If we remove that piece, then where are we going to put all these offices? Where are we going to put all these jobs?
I don't think we're talking about removing everything. The whole area is still a growth center.
But I hear you. What I'm saying is that we're talking about Pickering as possibly being a more of a residential area, and I'm thinking maybe Pickering would be better off as a commercial area, which it is like right now, with offices instead of residential, mixed use.
I think it's still both and. The whole area is our urban center, and it will have more jobs and more retail and more housing than it has before.
Yeah, I don't really love the idea of thinking of a job center in Issaquah. I like to think of that as running throughout, the same way that I think about our green necklace. I don't really love the idea of concentrating the concept of jobs into one neighborhood within the district. And so, especially when we think about driving around kind of the industrial park right now, where the school district wants to move in, where we have several big businesses in our community, and thinking about the fact that we are going to be getting some residential going in there. It really is a mix of things rather than necessarily thinking of Pickering as an industrial park. I haven't really heard that, and I haven't really seen that in the way that we've been describing the neighborhoods.
And I hear what you're saying. I just think I'm looking 20, 30 years down the road, and I think retail is going to make a major change. And so where are we going to have those jobs? Because it's probably not going to be retail.
That's the whole point of zoning it for mixed use. We don't have to decide that now. You allow all uses.
But there needs to be a caution that we don't turn into a suburban residential commuter community. That's not what we want to be. It needs to be a place where you live, work, and play. And I smiled because some of you probably weren't even born back when the Skyport was here, and we were promised the bill of goods for that whole development that's there now, that it was going to become an office park and become a job center for Issaquah. And of course, once they're granted their permits to build it, oh, sorry, the market changed. Now we got to do ugly strip retail with vast parking lots that you can't even walk between stores in, and that's what we ended up with. So we got to do better than that. And I do think, personally, there's a distinction between the north side of I-90 and the south, and I don't know specifically what the Rowley vision is for Hyla, but I suspect his vision there is probably different than what's the vision for Tibbetts Valley. So you can call it one district with different neighborhoods, or I prefer personally to have two separate neighborhoods, one north, one south at least, and maybe three.
I'm in favor of having it be one district, and I think that it would benefit a lot for connectivity if there were ways to overcome the barrier that is currently a big barrier. But from a vision standpoint, maybe there could be overpasses or walkways or some way to safely get across at various points, because I think on the south part of the district, they would benefit from access to the park and both ways. So if you were able to overcome that barrier, I think it would be beneficial, and I think it's beneficial to have it be one district to sort of support that vision.
So what if ST3 decided to come to us and say, we want to build our headquarters there? Would that change this conversation? Because that's a lot of jobs. And it's at the end of an ST3 light rail.
Or what if Microsoft says we did finally outgrow our Redmond campus even after their $1 billion expansion, and as they had planned to put 12,000 jobs up in Issaquah Highlands, that again never happened, maybe in 30 years from now, this is a great location for a corporate complex of some type, whatever those major businesses are. I agree with you, retail's going by the wayside, and in 30 years, you're not going to have shopping strips like that.
I don't know that we're ready to make that decision as to what will be there I think it's aspirational for us to say we're going to have this great idea and put something there so we can have a vision, but there's too many unknowns, and we should wait till ST3 comes, because I think once ST3 comes, that would become a very viable place for offices, like downtown Bellevue. I mean, granted, we don't want it downtown Bellevue in terms of the high rises, but in terms of the jobs, I think it would be a gold mine for a jobs market. It's at the end of a light rail.
2044.
Well,
If we wait to do anything in that area, or if we don't have any restrictions of what we want, we're not going to get anything that we do want. And you got to understand that that whole area is the regional growth center. That's where all the high rises and
but we don't have to build it out today.
no, we don't.
Well, we need to have zone capacity for it, right, under the PSRC requirements?
And we don't have to worry about the changing in the market either. If we want a certain thing in there and we think it's good for the city and the market goes crazy, we just wait. I mean, once you build it, it's done.
Exactly. That's my point. And I don't think we're ready to make the decision.
Well, but we're not making the decision on the use or anything. I think that the question here is there one or two neighborhoods north and south of I-90? That's the only question. All the development can still take place or will take place under the zoning that's there. I completely agree with Victoria that it's aspirational. If we keep it as two neighborhoods, we're saying that we're accepting the scar that I-90 has created in our city, and we're going to live with that forever. If we make this one neighborhood or one district, we're saying our aspiration is to get rid of that scar, someday lid the whole thing, and create one city center that we can have. And I would rather see that happen than leave it as two separate visions.
I think that's exactly the difference here is, so we've created a district in that we identified this as the regional growth center, right? So that happened. And I think the question is do you allow I-90 to be an edge, or do you say right now it's an edge and we're trying to diminish the impact of that edge through time and through development and city investment and maybe WashDOT investment? Likewise, if you were going to spin off Hyla or Sammamish Park, what you're doing is also saying SR 900 becomes an edge. And I think, it's at this point being very deliberate on those transportation facilities and whether they're divisional points or whether we're going to try and overcome them to create kind of singular areas. I think that's the conversation here. The use is, the zoning's the zoning. And I think what we're talking about is, is we describe, if we ultimately say Pickering is a neighborhood and Gilman or Tibbetts Valley or whatever we want to call the south one is a neighborhood, then I would hope that because they're both part of the core, we're talking about a mix of land uses. We already know that vertical mixed use is mandated on the south area, south of I-90. That was part of the moratorium, was creating a zone that had mandatory vertical mixed use. Whether or not residential ever makes it into Pickering, I'm optimistic that it is. But part of it is us saying we think that having residences in high-density residential near the Costco, because it is an employment hub for us. And it will be for a long time. If we get another office headquarters or large office developer and they choose to locate there as well, it's probably going to be because Sound Transit serves that area. It could also be because there's retail and residential right there. The suburban office market is pretty well dying, just because most office employees want to be in a more walkable, more mixed-use area, right? And so part of this is I think what we're talking about is this one or two or more? It could be three. I think we're talking about how many. We'll later talk about where the dividing line is, but I think right now we're trying to figure out how many is this? Is it one? Is it two? Is it three? Is it six?
Can we get a consensus?
I'll back off on my discussion about potentially 3 zones as long as Mel gets Sound Transit to build soccer fields and ball fields on top that knits us together, then I'm all for that, yeah.
So am I correct in, if my verbiage that AJ had proposed of saying one district with multiple neighborhoods, since obviously that's not the question, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a proponent of that, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
How many is,
I would also throw in, I wouldn't call it the regional growth center.
Yes, I would love, do we have a chance to address the verbiage of that?
yes.
Is this the appropriate place for that?
Yes, this would be fine. So I think the question is so how many, are we talking 2 neighborhoods?
Well, first, let's talk about regional growth center.
Okay.
RGC.
Yeah.
Is anybody a proponent of that? I know I'm not.
I am, because I feel like you brand around the neighborhoods, not around not around the regional growth center. I mean, like downtown Seattle, there's downtown, which is just downtown, and then there's the neighborhoods in downtown that have an actual identity.
I think that you might still identify with the neighborhood, but we could still have a name that people would use for that region. I think that if you call it the Regional Growth Center, you're sort of missing an opportunity to have something that people would identify with, and I think that this sounds, it's just, I think that it's kind of a missed opportunity to have it be called the Regional Growth Center when the other districts have names where people can really identify and say, oh, that's where I live, because I identify with Confluence Park or something else. And this, nobody would be like, oh, yeah, I know that I live in the Regional Growth Center.
I agree. I think we can rename it and still allow district identity to be the predominant way that we think of the market, Belltown, and the way that we break up downtown. Seattle, we could still do that same thing in this area without calling it the RGC.
From a marketing standpoint, RGC is terrible. You buy a Cadillac, and we all know it's a GM. So it needs to have a different name. But from a legal standpoint, we can still call it an RGC, Regional Growth Center, but we all know that it's going to be a Cadillac, right?
What if we just call it City Center?
That's awesome. I like that.
And I'm thinking of existing residents today. When they see regional growth center, will react in horror, like, why do we want to become a regional growth center? Who said that? So it's that name that attracts.
But let me, even though I know everyone disagrees with me, let me try one more time. I think that's why regional growth center is a good name, because, well, that's what it is. It is a regional growth center, and the people that live there need to understand that they live in a growth center.
But what that implies is downtown Bellevue or Amazon's headquarters in downtown Seattle. That's what the vision is, and what I'd like people to understand is some name that connotes that, yes, we're going to grow, but we're going to do so while enhancing the quality of life and livability for everyone who lives here. We're not going to just let ourselves turn into downtown Bellevue. That's to me the importance of that name.
So I will let you know that when we were approved by the Puget Sound Regional Council, when we were there at our meeting getting approved, you're patting us on the back, but saying that we really needed to work on our marketing and change the name. So they really, most are not named Regional Growth Center.
But the concept.
I just want to support you. I just want to say that I think we need to change the name, because what we see is, what we really want to grow is jobs. Because as far as housing, we've gotten what we really want here, and we're going to have some more with this, with high density. But what we really want to grow is the sustainability and the jobs, and keeping people working here and living here and enjoying what we have.
I'm looking at the name Regional Growth Center, and in order to get that mass transit there, we have to commit to have so much housing around it.
Right.
And so even though you want to change the name, which is fine, it still has to be a Regional Growth Center.
Well, I think this is very much a branding discussion, not and nothing more than that.
Yeah, and I heard City Center. I thought that had a good ring to it.
City Center is fantastic.
Yeah.
I like something more unique to Issaquah, but like Issaquah Center, instead of just city. Which city? Any city. Any city might look like any other city. Issaquah is unique, and it says that when we say Issaquah Center or something. Issaquah is not Renton, and we're not downtown Bellevue. We're going to do it our way that is in match with the values, the culture, the unique attractions that are Issaquah. So that's why, not just
I like
city.
both, but I think this probably should go to the community.
How about the Valley Center or?
I thought that too, but then we also have East Valley, and so then I'm like, well, then you need to rename East Valley, and I
You
went
call
back
it
and
Center
forth.
Valley, Center Valley, East Valley.
And so, I just thought it was a little too similar. So what I came up with was hokey, I'll tell you, and a little flowery, but I came up with chrysalis, which basically means development and growth, but is a little softer sounding name than the RGC.
So we don't have to decide on the name tonight, but
Thank goodness.
let's do it. How many questions are there?
12.
Well, okay. We're going to move this right on, but I don't think that we should leave him up in the air. We should have some consensus with all of this. So we have the consensus that it should be one neighborhood, one
District.
district. How many neighborhoods?
I say 4 neighborhoods.
I have a 2 and a 4.
I see 2.
I think 2.
2. I'm liking 2.
We call it a compromise and go for 3?
No.
I'll give you minority opinion on that, Ron. All right, so can we go to public comment? Who's going to arm wrestle to be first? Connie.
I am. So my vision of this is 2 neighborhoods, but what I want to see to provide an overall breakage of all of our roads barriers, because we have more than I-90 and SR 900. We have 56th, we have East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and we have Newport Way, all as those barriers. I would like to see a roads map that goes over the top and then mandates where there shall be crossings over the entire central Issaquah area. And that way you wouldn't have to have that district to break through I-90 or SR 900, but it would also break through the other road situations that we have. So I solved the problem differently. And then I think that the feel of the 2 neighborhoods are going to be very different. I think Costco is going to really create the character of the northern area, and the southern area is going to be more retail people oriented. And you have the Lake Sammamish State Park, which needs to be an emphasis on the north, which you don't have to the south. So I don't think you can consider it as one. I think 4 is onerous. So I personally landed up with 2. And I think Issaquah Valley might be just fine if you want to combine your titles. I don't think you can call it a center, because I think you're going to come up against Old Town as the heart, right? Old Town is really the center, and this is different than that. So I don't think I'm missing anything there. Thank you.
Anybody else?
We got to have a massive lid over I-90. It's got to have all these feeder buses from all those areas that aren't even in the transit area or sound transit areas. Got to come on I-90 and dump people. Otherwise, you could fill the whole area with parking garages. It's just critical that we have that, and that's going to blend these areas together by having that lid and the life that'll come with a major transit center right there. It's 2, but it's 2 and it's,
2. Consensus is 2?
So ditto Connie's comments and ditto Dave's comments. And Victoria, I don't think we met before, but thank you. I like the comment. I think that connectivity between the communities is important. It's not just sectioning them off by communities, but it's regardless of whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, or the whole community. We need to overcome those boundaries, so that needs to be part. And we need to look at more than just WashDOT making that happen. We need to plan for that to happen. So I'm still concerned with going with just one neighborhood because I think we're losing part of the characteristics of what people move to those neighborhoods for by going with just one overall neighborhood, and I don't want to lose that.
So before we actually move over, I got a question for you, Keith. Hyatt's, what is the plan for Hyatt?
Hyla?
Hyla.
So the plan is, so it's part of Rowley's development agreement.
Yep.
They are, they've already built 2 hotels, John L. Scott office building in there. Their next project is going to be, I think they're going to try for another office project next. And then residential will follow at some point. So it's mixed use. It's, the Rowley's vision for their property is in sync with Central Issaquah. So it's walkable, it's mixed use, it's high density. They have a similar vision as we do for the rest of Central Issaquah.
So their plan is to actually make it very similar to Tibbetts Valley?
Yes.
Okay. That's why I was thinking it should be its own neighborhood, because I didn't know that there was going to be mixed use in it. I thought it was all going to be commercial. And all right.
Okay. Based on questions 2 through 5, Central Issaquah will be comprised of, so we took out service, we took out Old Route 10. We left in for now Confluence. So we have Confluence Western Gateway. We have 2 neighborhoods in the RGC, or Issaquah Valley, or Central Valley, or something. And then we have East Valley. So I'm thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 neighborhoods.
Is Western Gateway out?
No, 6. Western Gateway's still in.
Western Gateway be taken out?
We can have that conversation. I didn't know it was on the
I
table.
think it should be taken out.
All right.
It's just housing.
Question.
Now.
There's still a lot left with the gateway that hasn't been resolved as far as the bridge over I-90 that's connections. So yes, you've got housing, but there's no parks. The road was not done, so to take it out, you're taking out some of the leverage to get funding to complete it, and also to be our gateway to Issaquah. So, I mean,
I think it
it's a
functions.
mistake that you haven't corrected, and you're going to leave it uncorrected.
It functions very similar to Confluence. It is a transition out of Central Issaquah, but therefore it then makes sense to continue to include it so you get the design and transportation benefits that are in the CIP, even if you don't have the density that you have in the core.
So how many neighborhoods or East Valley are you counting for East Valley?
I've got 6.
You've got 6 total, but how many are in East Valley alone? You're collapsing all of East Valley into one neighborhood? Yep.
So we haven't talked about that.
That's why I'm asking.
All right, so maybe we park this question until after we've done the districts, right?
6 plus, is that where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this isn't question 6?
No, it's not
So we
actually.
have 13 questions.
So question 6 is, are the boundaries right? So, and then I gave you guys, a question, and I think Ken hit it a little bit earlier. Oops, sorry. So as you get off Front Street on I-90, and we talked about the sinking kennel, and then there's a boat dealership. I am much more inclined to say service back in here, even though I think Ken sees it as a potential gateway. I don't. I see it actually as a pocket that is has a very different purpose for me as economic development. But these areas right here, out on whether you call that Front Street or East Lake Sam, they're very visible. And so back to a similar confluence, the value of being in Central Issaquah is you have the standards that relate to pedestrian orientation, to walkability. So for example, Carlson Kennel property, where did my mouse go? There it is. So, it sits right here. They just did the stream relocation, and they've cleared it off, and it's like now you can see the property and go, okay, wow, there's actually kind of a decent-sized piece of property there. The question is if that is not in central Issaquah, the typical suburban development of that property would be the building would be at the back and the parking lot would be out front, and there may or may not be a sidewalk that connects to the door. And then on the contrary, if you did it as a central project, the building would be up at the street. It would have that activity piece. And so I'm just bringing that up as one thing for y'all to think about, because if we take this out, the standards under IMC are very different than they are under Central. If we pooch out East Valley to grab it, that would be something I would actually ask you guys to consider.
So you would go to about 230th would be your eastern border?
Is this 230th right here?
I don't know.
Eastern
That's
border.
what I'm asking.
Eastern. Oh.
Eastern border would be 230th?
Eastern border would be like...
Not Fall City Road?
Well, Fall City Road's this one.
Okay. So how much further you wanted to go out to 230?
So I'm talking about these parcels right here.
I think that makes
That's
sense.
the auto body shops.
It's 230.
It's 230th?
Okay.
That's the auto body shop area?
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't wrap all the way, when we drove all the way back and there was Ruby's and the detail shop that was under construction and the RV park, not any of that. I think all that's kind of tucked back behind. It's really just the vacant kennel property and then the boat storage place.
It's basically all front-facing.
The frontage of Front Street or East Lake Sam. I'm not sure where it changes.
I like this idea of taking out service but extending that border, because it really is, we talk about it as a gateway only because after this stream relocation project, it's not our best face, and we'd like it to be a better face, I think, less than we want it to be a neighborhood like Western Gateway. So I'm a proponent of changing that border.
I'm down with it.
Yep.
Okay, and the other thing you guys talked about earlier was Gilman Village. So right now, that's this little kind of doorstep. So right now, I've got it in East Village only because it's zoned the same as all the rest of East Village. But it definitely...
Zoning should follow vision. Vision follows zoning.
Remember, I'm lazy. So I think it's a conversation we need to have.
I think that the character of being small, low density, quirky, but still very walkable, I think Gilman Village absolutely fits the vision of Confluence and not East Valley. And then if that means that it needs to be, then the zoning needs to be changed so that it fits Confluence.
What are the pros and cons?
Because if you look at, one of the key measures of success for East Valley is to maintain the character of Gilman Village. So number 4, that then becomes a key implementation for Confluence. And then we need to be very sure, as has been repeatedly mentioned in public comment, that our actual zoning rules are structured in a way that actually help maintain Gilman Village and not have it get torn down in the next 20 years.
So my guess is with you, the folks that live in the Confluence neighborhood now have more of an association with Gilman Village than, say, Home Depot does.
Or the storage unit that's going in across the street. Think about that line of Gilman. It's an easy way, even just looking at that small neighborhood. They're effectively neighbors to each other. When you think about kind of that Bogacha, the future storage unit going in already has a different feel. So from that measure, I would agree about adding it to Confluence. But does that actually change the zoning right now? I don't think it does. What I think it does is it presents a future conversation when we talk about changing zoning for the Confluence area. But I don't know that it actually does anything right now to protect Gilman Village. So I just want to be specific that I think that, again, this goes to vision and not code.
I agree with the idea of pulling Gilman Village into Confluence, but I think we should take a look at that area where Gilman Boulevard is, and that really needs to be part of that conversation of, is the mixed use, density, all of that going to just stick on the eastern side, or is that going to extend down Gilman Village? Because we really haven't had a good community conversation about what Gilman Village is, or what Gilman Boulevard is going to become. And so depending on the answer to that is, does that belong in the regional growth center or an extension of East Valley where it doesn't really fit, but hey, it's where we can put it?
Yeah, I think that's a separate conversation. I mean, you take the little notch and then give it the Confluence, but then what's left along south of 90, does that belong in the growth center versus East Valley? That's a separate question.
So if you, character-wise and what we're trying to do with Gilman Village, it definitely feels more like Confluence. When you look at this piece over here where Atlas is and the Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's really, when you think about transitions, you don't want to transition your lowest to your highest, right? In theory, there should be a step in between, which is what kind of East Valley is to some extent. So I like the fact that there's this piece of purple on the south side of Gilman right here, because I think it's a good kind of buffer in between the core and Confluence. But clearly, once you get to the east side of the creek, this is Gilman Village, and we're talking about it staying a much smaller level. So the question is, do you have this little area here being on the south side of Gilman, but the rest of it being in Confluence? I don't know. It starts.
So you're using the river as the dividing point?
River. Creek. Sorry.
River runs through it.
I like the concept that you're talking about of this merging between going from Confluence to what right now is the RGC, but it doesn't feel like East Valley to me. It feels like RGC when you're there. And when thinking about the development that is even just currently going on, it feels like RGC to me. So to me, it makes sense to add use that creek. We add Gilman into Confluence, and we have Gilman be our dividing line for East Valley, but
because you could go back to having that as a neighborhood, all Gilman, but make it a part of the growth center. Because I think we want to make sure Gilman, as you drive from 17th to Front Street, is just a single continuous corridor.
Mm-hmm.
So you lost me, AJ. So Gilman the Boulevard, not Gilman the old district.
Yes. So I was saying, have it be a part of the RGC district, but then kind of go back to, on the south side of 90, you'd have two neighborhoods, Tibbetts Valley and Gilman, to allow for kind of the step down as you move eastward along Gilman the Boulevard.
You're talking about just keeping the street in the regional growth center, in the RGC, and
no,
the properties actually.
He's saying make that area part of the RGC district, but then give it its own neighborhood name. Yes?
What's the benefit? What's the benefit to your argument?
I don't know. I think it just goes back to, I think I agree that it doesn't really feel like East Valley. I don't know.
So
Keith, what's the pros and cons of this conversation?
So part of it is, the more we dissect this, I actually loved when we did this and it was like, it went from 10 to 4. Because then it was like, because remember, I'm lazy, and then it was like I only had to do 4 descriptions of what these areas were going to be. So the more we dissect it into individual pieces, each of those have to stand on their own, right? So let's say we take this piece of Confluence, or the Gilman Village, and we put it in Confluence, right? So now we have this piece of purple down here, south of the freeway, and I agree, that feels very different than the Fred Meyer Shopping Center and up by Microsoft and BMC. It's different, okay? So maybe this becomes the Gilman neighborhood down here, not including Gilman Village, but maybe you would. I don't know. We need to talk about that. You know, and then what is it really? And does it have its own sense of place that's distinguishable and deserves distinguishment from the rest? Or does that then become part of Confluence and you just kind of push it to the freeway? So part of it is, I don't mind demising this as many times as you guys feel it should be demised, but every time we demise it, each area needs to have its own character.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree, we still want to try to stick to 4 districts.
Yeah, because is Gilman Village owned by the same person, right?
Aaron.
So if you take it into the regional growth and somebody offers money, it could be totally redeveloped.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So that's the other thing to think about.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, no, but that's something as far as
That's already a possibility.
Right, but which area you put it in, you know, the codes and that kind of stuff would change it. So if you want to try and enhance or to keep it, I would think Confluence would be the better place. If you really don't care, then put it in the regional growth.
It's prime real estate. So from an economic standpoint, I think being part of the Regional Growth Center, until we get a better name, I think would be smart.
Okay, this is what I'm going to propose, because I think we're starting to get a little confused. Right now, we have this little puzzle piece coming off of the RGC into East Valley. If you follow up the creek, yep. I think that line should be extended along the creek so that that tiny rectangle of purple right now, it becomes Regional Growth Center. We stop at the creek, and that little triangle, which is actually Gilman Village, if you, please correct me if I'm wrong, becomes part of Confluence. We've already moved that other line for East Valley to include what we're saying is the eastern corridor a little bit, correct?
So Joy, you'd take the southeastern leg of RGC, you'd now move it to the creek.
Yep.
So Atlas goes in.
Yep.
And so does
Which seems...
Kentucky Fried Chicken. So does the storage unit and medical office, yeah. And so then this little step stool is part of Confluence.
Yep.
And then we have this piece of East Valley, which extends south of the freeway.
Why wouldn't we make from Gilman to 90, that whole section of purple, why wouldn't we make that part of the Regional Growth Center?
This area here that's kind of the tire stores and stuff?
Yeah, with an exception of the little purple area off on the right-hand side of Front Street. Everything left of Front Street to the Growth Center would become part of the Regional Growth Center, and for that little section that's Gilman Village, you could do some special zoning there or move it into Confluence. But
I'm fine keeping just that little sliver right nestled on Front Street, because remember that, because at that point that's still part of your East Valley axis.
And remember too that we're trying to say, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, AJ. That we're trying to say, well, what are the feels of these neighborhoods? Okay, so we're still keeping to the core of these 4 districts, but we're saying, what does East Valley feel like? And my proposal is to say that the area of Atlas, that little piece, you know, to the creek, doesn't feel like East Valley to me. However, when we talk about this blending and not having the 90 be effectively a straight cut through our community, that area where you think of the gas station, the tire center, that feels more East Valley to me. That feels more in line as the neighborhood exists now.
But would it be better aspirationally if that changed and became part of the Regional Growth Center and grew with the Regional Growth Center?
No, I think that's
it's all-
fine, having a north-south your East Valley.
So part of, okay, yeah, I don't want to go there.
We're trying to talk about these blending right now. There's a reason that we're saying, you know, we've elected to say Confluence stays in Central Issaquah, however, it's its own identity. And so I'm trying to not have East Valley be cut by the 90. And so to me,
Do they have to be hard and fast lines? Can you kind of have like a vague transition area? Because these are, from vision map, I'm thinking like the necklace, you intentionally have some of the lines be vague and not following actual things. Can we do the same thing here and then just not specify that it's a specific road or creek, but just kind of have it be a bit vague dividing point between the two districts? Or is that unhelpful?
It's unhelpful.
Okay, never mind.
So we're trying to get more predictability, right? Vague lines lead to, no, I'm in this district, right? I mean, we don't want to do that. I don't want to
That's
do
why I
that.
asked.
Okay. All right. I like Joy's idea. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in of moving this RGC line over to the creek. And then I think there was general perspective of adding Gilman Village to Confluence. Okay.
It's a good compromise.
Okay, let's go with that. Public, are you going to want to comment on that?
Hey, Keith, I got one quick question for East Valley.
Yes.
Behind Fred Meyer,
Yes.
why is that part of the CIP? That's unbuildable land.
It's
it's not.
It actually, so it is buildable.
It's a hill, it's a cliff.
It's graded fill material. There's someone looking at potentially doing something there now. Well, they were before the moratorium. I don't know if they're still around. We'll see if and when the moratorium gets lifted. I cannot answer why that's part of Central Issaquah. I would defer to my long-range planners to answer that question.
When we were developing the plan, it was going to be used for affordable housing. An affordable housing provider owned it, and so we put it in there because we knew we were going to have trouble meeting our affordable housing targets, so we thought that would be a bonus to have a property owner and a property already in there, and then it was sold. So that ended our great aspiration of already having pre-ready affordable housing in Central.
Can we remove it? And what's the implication? I mean, would it make any difference to remove it? Because I don't think it should be built.
We can't, so it's private property. It has property rights. Someone who owns it can build on it to the standards that are allowed. The only way that the city can stop someone from building on it is to purchase it. So, and that doesn't seem like that's in the plan right now. So I just want you to be aware that leaving it in Central Issaquah, taking it out, does not change the fact that somebody could build on that hillside as long as they can follow the rules that are in place to do so.
And if they're going to build on it, I'd rather have them build something that fit CIP standards.
So we can go ahead and talk about this a bit. So under the original plan that came in was for a hotel. The hotel developer wanted to maximize the views, so they put that hotel as high up on that hillside as possible and had a really kind of nasty driveway that wound its way up to their building. And because it was in Central Issaquah, we said you cannot put it floating up the hillside. It actually has to be on Black Nugget Road. So they were then going to cut a big chunk out of that wall that's behind Fred Meyer and put that hotel so that the front door was on Black Nugget Road, because that's what the standards would say. So rather than a tall building up on the side of the hill, it was at least down at the road grade. And what's happened, or what's happening in the current Architectural Standards and Urban Design Manual, is the council have been working with staff to add some additional design guidelines specifically for this hillside. Having said all of that, if you guys think it should not be in Central Issaquah and should be regulated by Issaquah Municipal Code and not Central Issaquah standards, that you guys can do that.
So what you're saying is it would, by taking it out of CIP, would loosen standards?
It would give, I think, the developer maybe less density, but it would give them more flexibility to build differently on that property.
You bet.
Public comment?
Okay, so we're going to get to public comment in a second. I know you got a lot to say about that. So we have right now 2 changes to the boundaries. We're pooching out East Valley to grab the front street frontage. 3. Gilman Village and RGC. So any other changes to?
I see, isn't that piece?
You see.
I see, you see.
I see you too.
I was trying to make a very short, concise statement. I apologize. Maybe it was too summarized. Those pieces of the IC zone that I talked about a little earlier, just adding to the list. Right, and East Valley.
Right. Okay. Anything else before we open this up for public comment? All right, Steve.
So I agree with Gilman Village to Confluence. I wanted to add that I like RPC because I think it's truth in advertising. Let's call it what it actually is, and let's think that's where we're going to put our development. I still like 4 neighborhoods, though, and want to make sure that this gets maintained. Gilman Boulevard, I agree that further conversation is needed. I'd like to see the edible trail maintained. That doesn't get talked about as much. It's kind of something that was before my time. I know with all that growth, I just want to make sure that it's mentioned. Thanks.
I have no problem with any of it, but I do have a problem with the jagged edge on the hillside. I think we need the grading standards changed for all hillsides in town and a hillside overlay, but I think adding the density to this parcel makes it developable. Without the additional density, I think the cost would for a long time outstrip its ability to be anything, and hopefully in that point in time the city could buy it, because it is one belligerent parcel that would be better off in public ownership than in private development, in visually and access. So I would take it out of the central Issaquah plan. I do wonder about all the other jaggedy edges up to the top and why they were there, and if they can be removed or smoothed into something that seems more likely. I don't understand why the line is drawn that way in the northeast corner, but maybe that's a different conversation.
David?
That wall is so ugly right now, and it's on city property, is my understanding.
Yes, we own the wall. Thank you, King County.
And it's got, it does get complicated in that area. I'm not as, it doesn't bother me as much as it does some to have something go on that part of Mercer Island. That's all of the I-90 was put in a ditch on Mercer Island, and the clay that came off there, that's what the VZ property there is, all filled with clay. And they filled it other places. It's got a legacy all over eastern King County where they dump that clay and problems. And Costco ran into it at their new store in Redmond, in fact. But we've got it there on that hillside. So they over-excavated, then they slapped Mercer Island on top of it.
So that's Mercer Island dirt behind the wall?
I believe it is.
Historically speaking?
Yeah.
Do we return it?
Does that change your opinion on whether it's in Central or not? It's suburban dirt. All right. All right, so this is, before we dive into the individual neighborhoods or districts, I wanted some feedback on the structure. So if we have an overall structural deficiency, let's talk about that now. So what we did is we tried to describe what it was today. We tried to describe what we thought it would be in the future. So the outcomes were maybe some of the most confusing pieces in a way, it was intended to be similar to, I think, what Lindsay suggested, which was, what do you need what's missing? What do you need to get to have happen to actually get to your success? And so we can talk about that, and that one may be the one we spend the most time talking about. And then city implementing actions, and then measures of success. So overall, was this an okay structure to describe each of the districts?
I don't know if this would be part of the measures of success, but I think there should be breaks, controls, triggers. So if, for instance, let's say jobs. If jobs don't get to a certain point, we don't make that goal, then nothing gets built.
So we can't do that. So we can't put a neighborhood or a district under moratorium because the property owners aren't doing what we want them to do. I think the way you'd have to do that, Ron, is you'd have to basically rezone like the balance of the property instead of for mixed use for just like commercial. If we, let's say let's say that we decided that, the Tibbetts Valley neighborhood should be mixed use, and the only thing that was being built was residential. There was no office happening. The only way that you could, I think, change the disposition of that would be to take those remaining properties and change the zoning from what's allowed now, which is a mix of uses, to just commercial. You could do that. That's pretty intense to be that prescriptive with zoning, but we could.
Well, it's not exactly what I was referring to. When I say breaks and have triggers, for instance, let's say level of service at intersections. If we start having failed level of service at key intersections, then that has to be improved before we could move forward with further development. If jobs aren't coming to Issaquah and we have developers wanting to build only residential, then we can't build anymore because we don't have the jobs. We're not meeting our other target. So what we end up with is 13,000 potential more units and no jobs.
Right. So the only way, from a concurrency standpoint, traffic and traffic impact fees, that's all set, right? And so that piece is not going to be part of the equation that you would ultimately change land use over. If though, you got to a point, so right now, there's an obligation under Central Issaquah that we do monitoring and provide reports out every 3 years. That's how we got to where we kind of are right now. If you got to a point where you saw that a neighborhood was not building commercial, you then take two approaches. You could either figure out an incentive program to get the commercial if we're out of whack with our job expectation, or you'd have to rezone to allow only commercial. So that's the action the city could take to correct something like that if that imbalance if the market was providing that imbalance.
So shouldn't that be part of our vision?
Well, it's already part of the toolbox that the city has in terms of, so we have jobs and housing targets now for Central Issaquah and the Regional Growth Center.
Right, and my point is there's nothing articulating that we need to hit those targets. Right, so they're aspirational, but if we want to build this community and we want a strong, vibrant community, we need those jobs. And we need the level of service at key intersections. So as a community, before we can move forward and allow growth, it has to be controlled and braked by making sure that level of service at key intersections are able to handle the capacity, and that there are jobs here, and if we're not getting it, then have controls that will bring it here and slow everything down until we can get those thresholds, right? So if our target is 80% jobs, let's say, based on the amount of building that we have, we can't move forward until we get those jobs.
So there are a couple of things I want to correct here. One is that our targets, they're not meant for us to hit it. Those are a floor, not a ceiling.
Right.
So we are required to accommodate them, but not to actually make sure that that happens. Okay? So with both housing and with jobs. And it sounds like you're concerned that we haven't hit that 20,000 number, but that's okay as long as we accommodate for it, according to the state. The other thing, I went back and I looked at the numbers, and as of 2014, we had gotten just over 6,300 jobs, which means that we've hit about 32% of our jobs target for 2031. So that's come up a couple of times, so I wanted to mention that.
Okay, so we're at 30% for 2031, but our residential capacity is already at 2031, so we're failing.
It's almost there. Not quite.
So right now, we're outgrowing our jobs capability.
But one of the reasons we did this too is we were looking for a jobs housing balance. We needed that housing to come in and for the existing jobs that we had here. So
So part of it is.
Well, let's say that all of a sudden we start getting all this commercial, and we had all these jobs coming here, but we had no residential. So then we would have to slow the jobs piece down. I'm just saying we need to have control measures so we have a balanced solution, so we don't end up with where we're at today.
So, right now, I guess to answer your question, I think you're right. So right now, there's monitoring that we do related to Central Issaquah. We do a dashboard, although we're going to have to talk about who does the dashboard next year. And then, we do our monitoring. And at some point, the council and staff are starting to have, actually, with the end of the development agreement for the Highlands, having really good conversations about jobs and housing and expectations. And, that balance of that sweet spot, I'm not going to call it a balance. I'm going to say there's a sweet spot. We are a second-tier suburb of Seattle. That's never going to change, right? And so even though people right now choose to live out here because of environment, because of great school district, because of easy commute to the central city, those things drive a lot of what this city has been for the past 50, 60, 70 years. What will change as traffic gets worse, and this is my perspective, you don't have to agree with it, is that commute from Issaquah to Seattle will become less doable for some people. That will then drive more jobs in this city as CEOs decide, you know what, I live here, my family's here because my kids go to school here, and I don't want to sit in traffic for a half hour and the train's still 20 years away. So guess what? I'm going to build my office expansion rather than in SoDo. I'm going to build it here, and the market will correct that. So, but it's going to swing, right? So that's my belief, but I believe that market forces do actually kind of balance themselves out over time. If we continue to find reasonable transportation solutions, this could very well stay a bedroom community primarily with very, select office opportunities like Costco's headquarters, like Sanmar, like Swedish, and we have this list, and my hope and part of my job in my alter ego is to try and build that employment base so that our jobs housing fulcrum is better balanced. There's tons of scholarly reports about how housing jobs balance, and the belief that there's some way that you can get everybody to live and work in your community doesn't exist, even in central cities, because what happens is maybe one spouse works in the city, but the other one commutes to a job somewhere else. So the average, whether you're in a central city or in a suburb, it's 13 miles. It's the same. So, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be worried about jobs and housing. We want to have both opportunities within our community so that there are opportunities for people to live and play and work all in Issaquah, because that takes some of those cars off the roads, right? So I guess I'm not trying to dismiss your concern. It's a real one, but we don't have a measure that says, you know what, if our housing to job ratio ends up at 4-to-1, now all of a sudden we have to go and rezone the rest of the RGC to commercial only. That decision has not been made yet. I don't think that decision is going to be made as part of what we're doing here with Visions. I think it's an important piece to talk about housing and jobs balance and have them ideally work hand in hand. You know, and this is right now we've got a bunch of apartments being built. We've got Costco building office space. You know, so right now it's kind of working. I'm not too concerned at the moment. But we could go through a drought of where either there's no new housing, which is kind of where we started with, you know, we want housing on the valley floor, or we could get, you know, a bunch of new jobs and say, wow, how do we now incent more housing here? I mean, it's a continuum of conversation. I don't think there's clear lines where you say, if you get to this spot, you've got a problem.
And then one thing to maybe give you peace of mind, Ron, remember, this is a living document. Our vision is mixed-use urban, and we'll come back and refresh this document every 2, 5, 8 years or whatever. So there will be natural mechanisms as a part of the process to check in and then update everything. That doesn't need to be codified.
I agree with you. I just think that from a visionary standpoint, we should have that discussion about jobs and levels of service, even though they're not, streets are not really part of the vision. I think having the level of service of the streets is important, because we don't want to live in a community which is just clogged, right? You know, if we outgrow the streets infrastructure and we're not putting the money into the infrastructure to get us moving around the city, we don't want to live here, right? And this is a bedroom community right now.
It is.
Until we can get the jobs here.
So I want to jump back to these 5 that are on the screen. So I think the today's statement is clear. I think the future statement is fairly clear as far as a small, here's what we think it should be, but misses the details that I think council was looking for, which are things like the development agreements in some cases give a lot of specifics about what this is going to be. And so I think we need to specifically mention and link to the development agreements and pull out some of the unique characteristics. So I think that would be kind of in that future statement. I think also the future would really benefit from, you know, those garbledy maps that you guys created that have the, you know, mobility here and, okay, sorry. You know what, it's over. I know. Just the idea of a visionary map that says, we're going to do more here, we're going to create more mobility in this area. I think that would be beneficial.
A visual plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
a visual plan. There you go. The outcome area, I just really don't like that. I think it's too much of that planning ideals, as Mary Lou said. And then I think having sample photos that could be taken out of either the CIP as we're done with the previous ones, or taken out of the development agreement would be a really good idea. And then other details like sound transit stuff and how that's going to adjust what this area looks like. I think that goes into the what's missing, what do we need to accommodate over this visionary period.
I have a hard time with outcome, because for me, it feels a little bit of number 2 future, it feels a little bit of 4 of how do we implement it. So I'm a little less clear on outcome as a category, and I think it's interesting to have a conversation about measures of success. I think something that was brought up was, the fact that we have a lack of a grocery store in Old Town is a big deal, and the fact that the Jacksons is now supplementing that, while appreciated, is not necessarily what I think we want that neighborhood to look like. So to me, measures of success is actually a bigger discussion that may not be for tonight, but talking about what do we actually see and still need in these neighborhoods, and what do we measure as a value. Like, for instance, Confluence being able to stay Confluence rather than just having that creep coming in when we talk about the valuing future middle school walkability for residents, things like that. So I think measures of success really are defined by their neighborhoods, and that is a larger discussion. Again, kind of, that I broke apart for two different neighborhoods just there. That's obviously something we could do for every neighborhood and evaluate where do we want to be. So to me, number 3s and number 5, we're a little closer on the unclear, and everything else I think we're kind of closer on the clear. That's where we're at.
I like the way that the outcomes are presented, but to me they felt much more like objectives. So this is what we want to, so there's the future statement, which is kind of the vision, but then there's also these more detailed objectives, and then there's the measures of how do we qualify if we've met that objective, or to what degree we've met that objective. So I would suggest using that word for outcome. And then actions, I think, are good and specific in a lot of places. Maybe some could be a little fine-tuned, but I think that it's a really good section to have there. And I also really like the measures of success, although some of them I think are kind of they're more directions. So we want to move in this direction of having a safer crossing, for example, and that then feels like an objective. And then to have a measure of success where you can say, like, yes, we are something where you can actually say, yes, we've met this objective. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but I think that clarity of separating the objectives from the measures of success would be a good fine-tuning there.
So, yeah, okay. So the construct for me was, so clearly 1 and 2 are clear, right? So as you migrate down into 3, 3 and 4, in my mind, were the split between private sector and public sector, right? So the outcome of this neighborhood will be these things. If they're written clear enough, you can then have a developer have to comply with those when they come through with their project. So it gives both the city and the Development Commission, if it goes through Development Commission, they are akin to policy direction to say, like, you will recognize the compatibility, and I'm making this stuff up, I could just turn to a page which would be easier, compatibility of adjacent natural areas, right? And so there's an outcome there that we're after. It's not that the city's doing that. We're not buying up property and providing a public access way. It's if you're developing your property next to a wetland or next to, a riparian corridor, that you will provide access to that. That was the intent, and it didn't. I don't think I pulled it off. But the intent was, and because I'm a code person, and I'm the one who ends up dealing with developers who say, you can't make me do this. If we're clear in these things, residents feel connected with nature. I can say to a developer, how did you accomplish that? Right? And he can say, well, I provided a gazebo here next to the wetland. And they can say, okay, maybe that's good enough, right? So it's not prescriptive. It's not you have to do this. It's you have to achieve some sort of a whether it's an outcome or an objective, I don't know that I have a perspective. My English is probably not good enough to know which term is the right term. But that's what I was going for, and I clearly didn't hit the mark because Lindsay's like, it doesn't work for me. So I am completely, and I think we are all completely open to suggestions that y'all might have as it relates to specifically number 3 and how maybe that can be better structured. But the intent is, I think, because as you look at the pieces of this and how it's going to work, I want a piece that I can get developers to do the things that we're wanting them to do.
Can you relate an outcome to a specific code or policy? That may be a way to do that. You can leave more general language in these outcomes and then say, refer to code such and such, paragraph A, subparagraph 1, because that's a way you can then enforce it. Because if I'm a developer and you say, how are you connecting to nature, I'd say I'd put windows in my building so people can look out and see the sky. I mean, and you can't make them do any more than that then. That's the trouble with these things like that. It's got to be regulated and tight.
So I think if the policy's clear enough, you can. And so the problem is, you're right, Ken, if all it says, I guess I think that if someone says the way I achieved getting connection with nature is I put windows on the south side of my buildings, I would say, you know what, that's not good enough. And we might have to fight that out. But part of it is, so the rules are where it's black and white. And I think so the regulations, if you're next to a wetland and we feel like you need to put a public trail there, then we say you'd have to do that. But there's going to be times when it's like, all right, there's maybe a few different ways that you can achieve kind of what we're after, which is where this is.
So my example would be Atlas, where the whole intent was that was a key connecting corridor of the Green Necklace, and we didn't achieve that with Atlas. We blew it. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just, again, saying we got to do better. We can't let that happen. And whether that was objectives, codes, policies, outcomes, whatever it was, it just didn't happen the way it needed to at Atlas. And it's a really missed key opportunity. That was key to the whole Green Necklace.
I think we're learning, and that the reason that happened is that codes were not enforced. Yeah. I think that what Keith is getting at is there will be, hopefully, the overlays that Connie wants, and I think reading the comments that we got online, I think everybody was on the same page that you have to implement these things, and I think that's going to be done, hopefully, right?
I have one suggestion so I appreciate that you separated out, or that you explained the separation between the public and private part, or because I didn't pick up on that reading it, but now I sort of see it more. I think, though, that I'm then confused why the outcomes are in these distinctive, livable, connected, sustainable boxes, but it doesn't follow through to the city and to the measures of success. And maybe one way to also strengthen the connection would be to just sort of have it follow through. So you could have more of a matrix, because then you could have your outcomes for the distinctive, livable, and then have your city actions for also distinctive, livable, et cetera, and then also your measures of success sort of following down, because then you could make linkages a little better.
Okay.
So I think the future statement is good conceptually. I think it doesn't get into all of the details that council was looking for. And maybe that's unreasonable to have all of that, and maybe some of it is contained other areas of the Central Issaquah plan, like the mobility and future roads and trails and connectedness and things like that. I don't know exactly how to connect those, but I think there's an expectation that there are more details from the development agreements, from those types of detailed maps. So I don't know how to connect it, but I feel like it needs to be there somehow.
I don't disagree. I'm not sure how far to go down the rabbit hole, because you don't want the visions to be 400 pages long, right? Because then they aren't visions. So let me think about that and see if we can populate some more details in without
It might be
unpacking it too far.
useful to, when presenting this to council, to include it and, mention 7 pages down, there's this map and this one that give that connected feel.
I like having the shorter future statements personally, because I think that then you get into the outcomes, they're more specific, and they have these bullets, and then you could, especially if you strengthen the connection to the city and then the measures of success, I think that's where you get into the more details. I personally like the concise today, future, and then a bunch of details.
I think it's really important to keep it on one page. We just got to figure out how to do that, but to keep each district on one
I
page.
struggle to keep it on one.
No, it's hard. It's hard, but it forces us to figure out how to be concise.
I'd like to make a comment, I think almost before we close here. We all struggle with expressing our visions with this project, and I think from staff have done a great job. I think the task force has done a great job. The commissioners have certainly put a lot of effort into doing our best to understand this. The reality is we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to be coming into Issaquah for all this development. If we don't get it right, it's going to be a mess. I think for a reasonable price, it would be wise and prudent to have an outside organization come in and help us bake this vision, help us materialize our thoughts into actionable items, and help us build a vision rather than having us struggle through this exercise and trying to put what we think is the right thing on this document without having people who, this is what they do for a living. They have PhDs in urban planning where they actually, and no offense to staff, because I know you guys do an awful lot of work here. But I think the reality is when we're talking about this, there's so many things that go into this. And we're a small town and we're growing so fast, and I think we need additional assistance.
So I would rather spend that money myself. Visions are well and good. We could spend hours refining the visions, but they're meaningless if there isn't the backup codes and policies and regs to make them real. And I know staff is too busy. And if we need to pay somebody to come in and help staff write those and get them done quickly, that's where the money, you get more bang for your buck, and we get visions that are implemented then if you got the backup to make people do what we want them to do. And we got to get to a point, people need to understand that Issaquah is such a desirable place that we can pick and choose who we want. And if someone comes in and doesn't want to do what we want on that little piece of property, get out of here then. We'll wait for the next person to come along. In 30 years, there's far more demand than we will have capacity to absorb in this town. Just the other day on Facebook, there was a string of comments about the 15 worst cities in Washington, which then prompted a discussion about what are the best cities in Washington. Guess who the thread was about? Issaquah. We are recognized as the best city in Washington. So we don't need to accept just whatever comes in the door and think, we need that growth, we need that development. No, we don't. We need what's good for the people of this city. And if we have to wait, but the key to getting it is you got to have the backup codes and policies in place to make what we want happen. Otherwise, we're going to get more atlases and gateways.
And I'm sorry, but I disagree with the concept that we need to be spending, what it will realistically be $60,000, $80,000 to have a firm come in and do exactly what our qualified staff, our citizens who live in the community are working together to achieve. I think is a much better outcome than trying to outsource a firm telling us what our vision is. I think what we're doing in the work tonight and is far preferable to that idea. So I don't support that at all.
Well, let's keep that thought in mind, but let's continue on.
So I'm going to ask the public if they have comments on structure, and then I think we're going to, unless you guys are all, my coffee's empty, unless you guys are all a lot more into this than it looks like you are, my suggestion would be, where we're down to now is taking those districts and having you guys send your suggestions on edits to those, and I would have you just email those in. So what I would do then is synthesize your comments on the districts only. The rest of it, I think I've got pages of notes on the story, on the structure, the boundary changes. I think we got through an awful lot of stuff tonight. I think that now down to the specifics on each district, I'm happy for you guys to email me comments in if you want to proceed with that. Otherwise, if we're going to go through those four, I'm going to ask somebody to go on a coffee run for me.
Yeah, can we get a little preview of
Can you just toggle through?
Yeah.
We've waited all night.
Yeah.
Let's wait. Sorry. So public comment on just the structure of each district.
I have one, and I'm not comfortable leaving it without some direction as to where the neighborhood visions are going to go. So I would like some language saying that, for example, we are going to create a specific code package for each neighborhood that will be applied to that neighborhood at some point in time. Even a paragraph saying what the next connective tissue is going to be to code and when, because we're basically redoing, yes, we have the vision, and I don't know when the code will follow through. And I want some pathway that is sensible to let Development Commission be able to implement and staff to be able to look at it in a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. So I just want a little bit of what's the process once we look at this, and I don't think that's in the Central Issaquah plan or SIDS anywhere.
So every year we go through the what things are on the docket for you guys to do. That would be a nice little addition to put on there so that you have a date that you're supposed to have it done by.
I'm looking at my comp plan staff that are all sitting there like, okay. Thanks, Trish.
Well, I don't think,
No, I don't disagree. I was looking for implementation of that thought into some sort of memory that we'll all have more than the next 30 minutes. David?
I guess going more to Ken's comments, whenever the moratorium is over, if we don't have the codes and the policies there, I'm afraid what we'll get. And that's my biggest concern right now.
And just to comment on both those pieces, because it connects to Jones too before Steve goes, is I don't disagree. I want to try and get one task over the goal line before we saddle it with another big piece, because that's a big piece, right? And I think that, not that that's not important, but what we were tasked with right now is to update the visions. And I think that when you look at where we started and what we've got now, I think it's hugely different, but that's me. So, Steve.
Ditto all the comments I've heard before. Code. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So number one, I don't know that today seems still unclear as far as verbiage that talks more than just story. Number 3, I agree with Ron's comment. There needs to be some type of trigger or mechanism that says whether or not we're getting what we're getting and we can change at some point. So that's still unclear to me. Number 5 is still unclear to me as far as measures of success. Are we getting what we want? I think we're good at measuring economic development. I don't think we're good at measuring a green necklace or riparian corridors or wildlife corridors or anything else. That needs to be built into not just the story, but again to the code of where who we are, because I think the more that I've gotten myself involved, I know there are really a lot of smart citizens that volunteer, like all of you, to make what we want to be, but I don't think we're getting that. I think that's key, making that happen, be able to measure that success. If we also need some outside expertise to pick our brains better to make sure we're getting that verbiage and the wording, I'm okay with that. But we need to be able to measure the code we have in place.
Okay, so for each of the districts, you guys are going to be super let down because I didn't really, it's like just, okay, what do you want to change about Western Gateway? I didn't unpack it more than that. So for each of them, I figured we would just get into an overall conversation about each district, which, like I said, I am happy to do via comments through email if y'all would rather do that and get a better night's sleep.
When we ended the meeting last time, we ended it at 9:30, and I said we were ending it early at 9:30 last time because I wanted you all to be prepared to stay later tonight, and you said, okay. So I'm uncomfortable with having you just email your...
Okay.
I'm really uncomfortable with that because one stimulates somebody else that stimulates somebody else, and I think we're at a point in time that we really need to do that. So either we have another meeting, which we don't have time to do, or we spend a little bit of time with less comments and discussion, but specifics on what's going to happen.
So since we're not looking at Old Town sub-area plan on the 14th, is there an agenda for the 14th?
No, if you wanted to do this. If we didn't finish tonight, then council doesn't get this before the moratorium ends, and I don't know how that affects that schedule, but we were hoping to get done tonight if possible.
I might start crying.
Well, if this doesn't get done and the moratorium stays in place for one more city council,
No, the moratorium is over on the 30th unless council extends it.
So
Doesn't matter if we're not done with things.
So the council has another hearing scheduled on the 18th for the moratorium. Their choice on the 18th is they can lift the moratorium or they can extend the moratorium. Because the visions relate to all of Central Issaquah, for me, it would be hard for me to believe that they would lift it until this piece of the puzzle gets at least pretty well battened down. And since they haven't gotten to see version 26, I don't know. I would not expect for them to lift it. Now, they might. We've gotten all the rest of it done. So the other 5 moratorium work items are done, almost. Inclusionary is on its way, but and architecture reviews on Monday. So in theory, by the 18th, all of them but this one would be done. The problem, if we do have a continuance of a conversation, is we can, but unless the council wanted to have a special land and shore meeting after the 14th, but before the 18th, and that doesn't seem likely, since that would be like Friday, they wouldn't have a chance to look at our product. So we're running out of time. Now, the extension typically is 6 months, but they don't have to do 6 months. They could do 2 months, but it's That's what we're facing. We've been working hard to try and get this all done by the end of the year. That was been a goal. And so I think that's still my goal. But I understand I'm ready to stay for a long time if we want to go through the 4 neighborhood districts.
Could we go through one and see?
How it goes?
Well, how it
Sure.
goes at least, and then get into the other
Yep.
one?
So Western Gateway's first. Mary? Any comments? We had the conversation of should it be in, should it be out? That happened already. So I think now, again, back to let's talk about each of the 5 sections. So description about today. Okay. Future.
The only thing, I'm already talking to WisDOT about when their soundproof wall goes in place, that'll be our welcome to Issaquah, big cement wall. So we need to get plantings there, and I'm talking to them about a gateway entry welcoming sign in the, what do you call it? Off the shoulder to the edge of their right-of-way between the wall and I-90. So I would prefer if this said not just incorporated into the new connection over I-90, which may be 20 to 30 years away, but say in the right-of-way and or on the connection over I-90.
Okay, I think that's a good suggestion.
I had implementing actions. Okay, implementing actions. I wasn't prepared to do this. We need the crossings to exist between neighborhoods and across Newport Way to the trailhead. Because as it's worded here, it's basically getting people into the transportation, but they need to connect the gateway with the existing neighborhoods, which is not part of the vision yet for Newport Way. So that needs to change. Also, we need...
Whoa, hang on. So say that again, Mary. So which number were you reading?
Number 2.
Okay.
Add and crossing to existing neighborhoods and to trail. Safe, because right now the emphasis is on getting gateway people into Issaquah, not to existing neighborhoods. And that's very evident by what we see going forward with the concept for Newport Way.
Okay.
Anything else?
And then also transit, local transit or ways to get to the transit center from the gateway area. Nothing said about that.
So we've got it in the outcome piece.
Yeah, but the city's got to work with that to get it.
Right. So that was, I didn't understand that was actually likely until I talked to my staff. So I'll add work with Metro on the Newport route, which is 3.4 under
Well,
connected.
or something, or a local transit. Well, it doesn't have to be Metro, it can be a local system some way.
Well, what I
again.
was told is Metro's already made a commitment to add a Newport route to future.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't, it just, who defines it? And measure of success, wildlife corridors from Cougar down to the lake.
Along Tibbetts Creek.
Well, not only Tibbetts, but we've got Snyder and Aviation. I mean, so it's all of those is wildlife corridors, through there, connect them to Lake Sam. And measures of success is salmon in all of those. Obvious salmon coming back in all of those.
I had one more minor but important one, which is in distinctive descriptions, item 1.2 there, and it talks about Mountains to Sound Trail and Cougar Mountain Trailheads are regional destinations. Well, that's true, but if you're a local resident, it's like, wait a minute, why do I want that in my neighborhood? And so it should read, those Cougar Mountain Trailhead are adjacent amenities and regional destinations. Because it's an amenity for the local people. We're not trying to draw everybody in the region to their neighborhood. It's for them and for others.
Keith, I also want to make sure on implementation number 6 about the noise wall, that that's something that we're able to highly control the aesthetic design of, and whether that goes to the Arts Commission, whether that falls within design standards that is overseen by somebody else, that implementation action is highly controlled by our community.
Well, okay. We can do our best.
It could come out really badly if
it could.
And it could be the face of our community anyway. When we talk about we want signage, that will be a sign for our community.
I'll definitely put that in there as an intended outcome, right?
Yeah. Something that properly reflects our community rather than just a concrete barrier.
With maple leaves imprinted in it.
Salmon. No more salmon.
And Keith, I want to add to that wall.
Yes, sir.
Because I have personal experience with this. When I lived in the Bay Area, I lived about a mile away from a freeway that I never heard before. And when they put these sound walls up, the noise became very, very loud. And so we have a lot of communities that are on the hillside.
Yep.
If we build a hard barrier wall, that sound will ricochet off those walls, and these neighborhoods will hear the freeway. It'll sound like a river running through your neighborhood. So I do not like the idea of having a hard wall. You can have a vegetation wall or other soft walls that would absorb the noise, but there are other ways to reduce noise through asphalt, the quality of asphalt used, and other types of attributes. I'm not for walls, and when you drive down 90 through our town, and you see a wall, it's going to look like you're riding through Linwood or Kirkland. It's not going to be a very glamorous. It's going to look like 405. Do we want that in our neighborhood? No. It's a sticky problem, but it's a.
So one person's wall is another person's potential, blight. So, I think to Joy's point, you don't want 4 miles of blank concrete tan walls as the signature of Issaquah, right? So from an aesthetic standpoint of travelers either visiting our community, traveling past our community, or those of us that live here or work here, you want that aesthetic from I-90 to be distinctive and representative of our community. I don't disagree with you, Ron, because I actually used to do freeway planning in Phoenix, so I know all about noise walls and the travel of sound. The problem that you've got is I don't know what the noise levels are right now of just the bleed through up the hillside versus if you make a canyon and contain some of that noise, how much of it actually spills over the walls. To some extent, it depends on how tall those walls are. And part of that's, our desire for the aesthetic of not having it be a canyon versus, having some spillover over the top. So it's a complicated topic. The tree-lined or the shrub line, I can tell you that that's not effective in dampening much noise from freeways. It will do some, but not much. So if you truly want a noise barrier, it needs to be concrete wall.
Sound absorbing wall, not concrete.
Well,
yeah, it's a sound absorbing.
When we talk about walls, I worry about the sound. I can already hear 90 on the top of Squawk, and if you put a sound wall up, I'm going to really hear that freeway, and Highlands will too. So it's going to be a really important attribute, and I think if you build it, people will scream bloody murder. One, because it's a visual blight, and two, it's going to affect the entire town, whereas right now it affects the retail, the properties that are most adjacent to the freeway, but the other neighborhoods can tolerate it. And I don't think it's the right solution for us. I think there are other attributes. Higher quality grade of concrete or asphalt would help minimize that if we push for it.
So, not to bring us to the RGC, but since that's also an implementation action for that as well, I think it's fair to say that we want to make sure that our community highly controls how they go in and that they represent our community. I think we can carry that through forward for all noise walls along the I-90 corridor as a transit community that people come in and out of. It matters to us, and so we communicate that to staff. Not sure what the best way is to achieve that goal yet, but know that it's important to us and let us know how we can help you do that right.
You can add a few words in here to address that.
I can.
You're not going to necessarily get everything you want working with Sound Transit or anything else, but we can try.
So I think number 6 should be work with WSDOT to reduce the noise, but I don't like the idea that we're immediately going to walls as a solution.
Run the Regional Growth Center.
That's number 2.
We're on number 2.
Any other comments on RGC other than we're changing its name and splitting it into at least 2 neighborhoods?
So there's 2 huge development agreements in this area, and I think highlighting those.
I have made note of the Raleigh DA and the Costco DA.
Okay.
So that's on my list.
Along with that, I don't know, there's just something to Costco and their potential expansion areas. Never mind, that's in the DA.
It might be nice to see what does the city foresee this looking like these 2 neighborhoods. So when we talk about kind of, Mall Street turning into, so some of the visualizations that we've had, even if simple, might help to communicate the message of what we're trying to achieve in this area.
So, yeah, I think one of the suggestions from Lindsay about adding some photos of, not everything, but, if there were 3 or 4 photos of each kind of district or neighborhood to help visually, because some people do better with pictures, some with words, to show that Confluence is different than the RGC, which is different than East Valley. I mean, I think what we're doing is we're creating very different areas within Central, and I think that having some of those photos, I think, will be helpful. So I think that was a good suggestion. I don't know if you were thinking of something else, Joy?
I think some of it's going to have to be abstract. I don't know that it's going to be photos. I think some of it might be like what we saw when we were going over Mall Street isn't actually real. They weren't actual photographs. They're concepts to help draw in. So one thing that was really that I really enjoyed about going around on our walking bus tour was this concept of this is what it can be. This is what this developer's interested in. And so kind of giving people that visualization, because right now if you were to walk into, let's say, the Fred Meyer Home Depot, asphalt parking lot, it's hard to imagine, well, where would you put condos, townhomes, or whatever, and being able to go around talking about, that we talk about that, the blight of the wall. What can a hotel on the hillside look like that is integrated into our community? So, well, the hotel's a bad example, but I think that when we try to communicate a vision of the RGC, it might help to say, this is what we see the future of Issaquah looking like, rather than just this is what it is now, and there's this hard line between where we want to get to.
There's great programs that can draw in that stuff.
Summer intern job right there, yeah.
One other thing, I feel like the Lake Sammamish State Park, while it's mentioned in the Today section adjacent to, there isn't anything on the Future section about how there should be more connectivity there.
Okay.
And I think for that, I would suggest that you, in East Valley, take section number 3.5 under connected, and number 1 in city implementing actions, and just take both of those and put them into Regional Growth Center, number 3.
Okay.
Is that the number 1 in city implementing actions in East Valley? Yep. Access and 3.5 under connected.
But again, I'm going to stress, that's all good, and I agree with that, but something about the green necklace, unless we all agreed that you're going to create a page specifically for the green necklace that precedes all these visions.
I think we agreed to that.
All right, then that should cover it, because I had lots of comments on how that should be integrated in here. One other comment on under sustainable, 4.4.
Yes.
I don't like the wording. Development has not resulted in a loss of employment. How about development has resulted in a gain of employment? It's a better way. It's a more proactive, optimistic way of looking at it. And then also on 3.3, Sound Transit Station is a central hub. I would like it in our vision to be very clear that that hub needs to be located within the footprint of the I-90 right-of-way. That's our vision as a city. Sound Transit may not like it. Tough. That's our vision. At least
But
it's my vision.
that conflicts with the code that we've already passed. We've already passed code that allows them to put wherever they want. We've opened it up for them. So I don't know how we have a vision that actually contradicts work we've already done.
Well, even if the code would allow it to go anywhere, our vision can say we wanted it right in the I-90 right-of-way, under or on a lid
yeah.
that integrates parks. It has the flyover bus ramp, so we don't have all the traffic clogging us up. I mean, we better lay that out, or we're going to get wherever Sound Transit wants to go.
I think AJ had mentioned earlier.
Hang on. Is the slug map in the comp plan or in SIP?
It's in the central plan. But
Okay.
I think what Joy was referring to when we came here with the public hearing on more specific zoning, that it kind of died.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
we-
not there. So all we have now, we just have the slug map.
Okay.
So there is a map in the Central Issaquah plan that shows 4 possible locations.
Yes. That's the slug. It looks like a slug.
So should we narrow that down to one?
I think so, because again, when you talk about the plague of Issaquah today being a commuter pass-through town, if you want to avoid that, as it's even worse 30 years from now, then you need to have the vision that says that station is right in the footprint of the main transportation corridor with everything feeding into that, and we make that our vision. Otherwise, you just end up with more pass-through commuter traffic getting to the train station.
I mean, but that could be a
else.
task force into itself, too.
Well, Sound Transit will probably do that. Yeah.
Well, all right, I doubt they're going to consult us. They're going to do what they want. So,
Well,
I mean,
Wash-
if you want to go that direction, I think that we almost need to have the city-appointed task force like we did with the traffic issue recently to say, what is the best place for our community?
One of the things, and since this is going to be, I think, where we have most of the housing, we still haven't addressed the schools. And in sustainability or someplace, I think we need to define that, live, work, and play and go to school, by walking. Because if we don't work closely with the school district, we're going to be busing all these kids to Timbuktu. So someplace in here, I think we need to work that in to make sure that we are identifying, working closely with the school district or with charter schools to build charter schools in some of our mixed-use buildings.
Well, does that go back to the visions that we had about urban schools? Staff had the agenda item to go back. I mean, is there a way to integrate that verbiage, though still yet to be created?
Well, we're coming back here to talk urban school policy at some point in next year. I think we promised first half. Vaguely remember that. So that part is going to happen. I don't disagree with Mary's comment, that part of the conversation we've been having about the potential Hilltop Elementary School site is, the need to put schools where the population gain is, so you diminish the amount of required busing that's necessary. And I think we all would agree that that is a good outcome, right? Or objective. I still don't know, Vicki. And so if we expect to have 7,500 housing units, in the vicinity of in the sub area in this district, there should be some conversation about schools. So I agree with that. I don't know where it goes, but yeah, I don't.
Well, I see maybe in this district, since that's going to be the largest.
Yeah, wow, I don't know. I don't know if it wants to be in the RGC or somewhere around the perimeter. I don't know.
Well, it just needs to be noted some here so it doesn't get forgotten again.
I agree.
Because it got forgotten the last time.
I had one more thing. I had a question about, in the today statement, we have the function of Gilman Boulevard remains undecided. And yet in the future, I don't feel like we addressed that. And it kind of was like, well, it's not a very positive statement, and it's also doesn't really give a direction of what we would like to
It's
have.
honest.
It's honest, but I feel like that because of the way the structure lays out, we might want to have an actual part of it, readdress that in the future, So, we envision Gilman Boulevard to be a corridor that connects, I don't mind the statement being in there today, but I do mind it just being left hanging.
But we kind of hesitate, though, to identify a vision here because there is something in the work plan, and we've hired a consultant to do a vision for all of Gilman from 900 to Front Street in 2018.
I don't think we have to say what the vision is.
To identify the vision, I think, is a little premature to do it right now.
And I don't think we have to say what the vision is. I think to Joy's point, we've kind of set up we've got this kind of thing that's out there, and then we just don't even address it. I think saying that maybe in the future that Gilman Boulevard is
has the potential to do something
or has been integrated into, the district or in the neighborhoods to a point where it's an asset. I mean, I think you could be as loose as that without getting into specifically, like, what is it? Because I don't even know.
It's not specific, it's a vision.
Yeah.
If you want to put that in there, I think that's great. Anything?
So I have two things. One is, and this has come up a bunch of times, but I think since it's a vision, I would like to see there be wording about having a cover over I-90 or a lid, because it's not actually in the vision. And then the other thing would be, there's a lot of mention of connections and crossings, but I think it should be considered, especially for the smaller roads like SR 900, relatively speaking, also tunnels. It could be an option.
High water table.
Yeah.
Okay.
You dig and you catch water.
Okay, so there's nowhere where it would work.
Tunnels are hard here. Tunnels are hard for us, unless you're in, the Highlands
Right.
could have a tunnel, Taos could have a tunnel, but Valley Floors, you can get water at 6 feet.
Okay, then a lid. Leave it at a lid.
Yeah, I like the lid, but I also felt like, I know Mary already mentioned this, but for the Western Gateway, which I agree with, but for this one, for measures of success, is again, wildlife corridors. When we talk about connectivity, I think that needs to be emphasized, we're not just trying to connect people, we're also trying to connect the environment. And right now, that's still, a migration path into the park.
I wrote it down.
Everything.
No, so this applies, I noted this one here, but it truly applies to every district, neighborhood, whatever, and I don't know where you'd want to fit it, but under city implementation actions, I would like to see some aspirational goal that says something along the lines of use the transfer of development rights program and development mitigation to enhance density without handing out free up zones. In other words, there needs to be, you don't just give everybody instant multimillionaire status and say, now you've got 50 units to an acre instead of 5. Make them buy into that by offsetting with other open space, by helping with road improvements, by doing some of the green necklace, by whatever else we need as the amenities that make this livable. You don't just get the free zoning. You got to buy into the vision and then you get your zoning. So somewhere that needs to be woven into this whole plan as city implementing actions, or just the overall approach to how we will let that density fill in here. It's not just given out freely like candy.
So I don't disagree. I think where I would stick it, Ken, is There's clearly no oxygen left in this room.
You lose it after 10 o'clock. That's just the way it is.
All right. I think I would place it in the story section in terms of talking about how, this area has already been upzoned, and that basically that the city has smart growth tools like TDRs and density bonus program to provide for additional density where property owners see fit to go after that, and rather than having the city increase zoning beyond what's there now. So I think, I think that could be part of the story.
It needs to be documented somewhere that that's the planned approach and vision is not to just hand it out freely, but to partner with developers, and they need to buy into it. If they want the benefit of added density, buy into making this community absorb that density with some other attractive features that benefit the whole community.
Okay.
I don't see any rush to the microphone.
Okay, yeah. So throughout all of this, it's like, what's the public benefit? And so I went to the effort of reading San Francisco code while I was down there because they have a lot of this conversation about how to increase density. And they just say, if you want to be this dense, you have to do the rules and you have to do these things too. And that was very specific block by block pictures of this is going to be a park, and they drew the park in that area. This is going to be your plaza, and they drew it in that area. This is the area for your affordable housing, and these are the 3 blocks where you can actually have your increased density. And they just described very clearly what you shall do in order to be able to build in San Francisco. And it wasn't an option. It was just, you are privileged to build here, and so we get the bonus as the community with lots and lots of language of, and how do you protect the individual values of each community. And so when I read this is the place where I think you could start asking for that. So in your beginning language, you see a lot of, and it has to make the community better. Where that language falls short is where we're asking for changes. We're just asking for the baseline. And I think we're missing the whipped cream that would actually make the community happy to have development. So.
I don't generally have comments on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. There was one that stood out that was mentioned that this is the area for affordable housing that wasn't necessarily in the other ones. I just think if we're going to have affordable housing, we need to talk about how that and where that's going to happen throughout. Just an observation.
So I appreciate that. And just so that you know, Steve, the reason why some of the neighborhoods or the districts have specific mention for affordable housing is because of the inclusionary requirement in East Valley and the RGC. So we know we will get it. There's, so part of, I think, what I heard, and Lindsay can tell me if she heard something else, what I heard from Land and Shore was part of the criticism of the existing visions is we weren't getting what it said we wanted, right? And so if, like in Confluence, we say we want affordable housing in Confluence, then what's the tool that we're going to use to get it? And right now, the inclusionary is not going to extend into Confluence. And so I don't disagree. We have an affordable housing program that we're trying to get a certain number overall, period, right? I think that, if there's an opportunity, and there actually is one potentially in Confluence because the city owns the at-work site, so we could. And I thought maybe I did actually put that in there because of that. But like in Gateway, I don't think we're going to get any affordable housing in Gateway. I mean, because that ship sailed and there wasn't an inclusionary requirement. We upzoned the land and we missed that boat. So I don't disagree with you, but there's reasons why some places it specifically says affordable and some places it didn't.
Is there anything else on any of the 4 things that are in here?
I have a comment before we close.
We're not closing. Go
Okay,
ahead.
no. All right, I'm going to hold off until we're closing.
Are we not doing 3 and 4, aren't we?
Joan, skip to the end.
That was my thing of trying to get you, I know you've made actually some comments about 3 and 4 already, so I wasn't sure if you had more things to.
I have a couple kind of small ones. In 3, it talks about under distinctive, it says horizontal mixed use provides housing and employment opportunities. It seems like we were looking for vertical mixed use as well.
So, I'm sorry, Mel, are you in East Valley? East Valley,
yeah. So item 1.2, under distinctive.
I got to be in the wrong place. Oh, I am, sorry. I'm like reading that 3 times saying, that doesn't say that. We clearly got to a point. So as we vanned around, we talked about East Valley a lot, and you're probably not going to see a change in the Microsoft office buildings. I mean, you've got 750,000 square feet of Class A office. It's probably not going anywhere anytime in the next 30 years. You've got the school district that's moving forward buying one of the Space Labs buildings, and that's going to be their new office buildings. You've got probably the FedEx site is going to turn over at some point and could be vertically mixed use, but could also just be residential. The BMC site, as we talked about BMC and kind of that east side of East Lake Sam, I think at least some of the conversations that we had was that seemed like that was a lot more like residential, like maybe, townhousey or something along the lines of. So as you started to talk about the construct of what was happening there, it seemed more like we had mixed use, but it was more horizontal mixed use, where as opposed to the vertical, which we saw more in the RGC. And so it doesn't mean we won't get some vertical mixed use. I mean, I think, the owners of a majority of the Fred Meyer Shopping Center right now are actually talking about vertical mixed use.
That's, I guess, my question. Could we just change it to say horizontal and vertical mixed use?
I don't have a problem with that.
I think we talked about in the future statement, it talks about it being a less dense character than the RGC.
Yeah.
So I would say generally mixed use is more dense when you're talking vertical, less dense when you're talking horizontal.
Yes.
I
think that's the vision for the area, or at least what we can expect.
I don't know. I would see Fred Meyer as you come in there and you put in a 5-story of wood over ground level retail in a location like that as being very typical in what we'd see on the Albertson site, kind of going in. And again, I could see both of them happening.
It doesn't mean it has to happen. It just means that it could.
Yeah, that if somebody came in with a vertical, we wouldn't be able to go back and say, sorry, you can't do it because our vision was only horizontal.
Yeah.
I was curious about, for implementing number 3, when we talk about gathering space with a view of Mount Rainier, but we don't actually have that mentioned as a measure of success. I'm curious if that looks like a park, an amphitheater.
I also call it Trish's pipe dream.
Yeah.
So,
I'd love to know what a measure of success looks like from the city as to achieving that. Right now, again, it feels like a threat of no man's land, telling me that, Gilman has, what is the place of Gilman in my community? Public space for around here. I would like, so we have a specific session that is a measure of success. I'd like to see that addressed.
Thank you for connecting the dots.
There's obviously a few things about Gilman Village that need to be pulled out.
Yep.
There's in East Valley City implementing actions, measures of success, regional traffic impacts on East Lake Sammamish Parkway, Brady Manage. Could we add N56 as well?
Yeah, good point.
And then throughout East Valley, there's discussion of East Lake Sammamish Parkway evolving into a pedestrian bicycle-friendly
corridor,
route. And I'm a biker. I would not bike on East Lake Sammamish Parkway if I can go on the trail. I don't know. We'd want to put a lot of money into putting bikes on a Parkway when we have the trail right there.
Well, and what we talked about when we were at the task force is with the redevelopment is creating the pathways inside. Remember? I mean, what basically the backs of the buildings would be to east the Parkway, and they would face one another with your pedestrian, your sidewalks inside.
Like a U village.
Yeah, like a U village. So knowing that the traffic with that many lanes, it's not going to ever be pedestrian friendly. Because right now, they're not using East Lake Sammamish. So with the development, creating new roads.
Well, that's because there's not really, well, two things. I don't think there's really facilities that are continuous on East Lake Sam that give you that level of comfort that you're not going to get hit by somebody going 50 miles an hour to Sammamish. But also, so the question is, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, is it defeatist not to say we want to try and turn East Lake Sam into a more pedestrian and bike-friendly facility? I mean, right now it's been designed to move as many cars as quickly as possible from point A to point B. And I think the question is, do we try and reclaim that street, or do we say it's a write-off?
Well, the reason that we've always left it in there is because in 2004 and then again in 2014 when we did the first non-motorized plan and then walk and roll, the commuters that we talked to said that they would rather ride on the street because they want to fly through there instead of having to ride on a shared use route where they risk running into pedestrians and have to go slower.
Right, but
so
part
that's
of
the reason
plan,
it's always been in there.
Part of when we were looking at the layout is to create a few more through roads that were more bike friendly.
Sure. I mean, I think improving the grid would definitely help.
Give them options, right.
So because I actually bike that route for a commute to Bothell and to Redmond.
On the trail?
On the trail. I can actually save almost 15 minutes by taking the road over the trail. That's huge.
Huge.
That's actually doesn't make any difference. It was before they closed it. So I used to take the road because it was a whole lot faster. And when I commute, I see a lot of bicyclists doing the same thing I'm doing. And I don't see as many bicyclists taking the bike path. Although the bike path is really important, especially when it's wet because you don't get all the spray. But if you really want to fly, you take Lake Sam, and it's a lot faster. But I don't know. I think it's really important to maintain a bike-friendly pathway on the road. But the people that take Lake Sam as far with bikes know that it's not very friendly.
So part of it is it's hard to look far enough down the road, so to speak, right? But I mean, if you envision, like if you took BMC and turned it into a fairly big residential complex, and let's assume that the second Space Labs building turns into housing or FedEx turns into housing, and we start to actually create a real neighborhood there. So right now, I mean, you've got basically people cutting through that area to get around the intersection of East Lake Sam and 56th in the morning, because it's faster. And right now that's fine because nobody lives in there, right? And as soon as people live in there, that's going to be a problem. I think likewise, what we've learned on Newport, where you allow roads to not have all the facilities that people expect, there's going to be somebody at some point is going to say there should be bike lanes, there should be wide sidewalks. People are still going to drive 40 miles an hour, but we should have pedestrian facilities on that road that recognize that. I don't know.
Well, I think Newport is a little bit different in the sense that you don't have the East Lake Sammamish Trail, which is an alternative. And I use that when I commute to Seattle as well, and it's a little hairy in the mornings because you have so many cars zooming past you, where Lake Sam, you at least have a bike path the whole length.
Well, I think on Newport, we're talking about a mixed-use trail and bike lanes, right? Eventually. Hopefully sooner than later. So I don't know. I mean, I think we should be thinking about all modes on all streets, even if right now they're kind of scary.
I had a note for for Confluence, if we're ready to move on to the last neighborhood, and that is to have in the implementing actions that we actually say that we are looking at having staff address code to help keep the characteristics of the neighborhood.
That probably should be in each neighborhood.
Well, we've specifically talked about it with Confluence tonight, and so I think it's important to think about it as an action item. If you don't want to put it in the implementation actions, but it's something we've discussed, and it may need language to help preserve it in a similar way that we've, done with Old Town, though again, not in Central Issaquah, treating it a little bit like I don't know, I hate to say a special neighborhood within the district, but
They all should have their, I think the point of this is to get, I think part of the problem is we had 900 acres or 1,100 acres, I keep forgetting how many acres, of Central Issaquah, and this was to actually make more distinction. And I think your point is a good one. We did talk about Confluence. There does need to be, if we don't do any of the other code revisions, that one needs to happen if we're going to have it be a transitional neighborhood like we described.
And just one other measure of success for the different areas is tree
Don't be quiet,
canopies.
something will come up.
We really haven't talked about tree canopies, but I'd like to see, something put in there as far as a measure is the tree canopy in this area is increased. Because I think most of our tree canopy right now is from outside this area.
I'm not touching trees. So I'm just going to be honest. I mean, the tree code, we've got Central Issaquah tree code, we've got IMC tree code. I think the whole tree code piece is heading towards a whole remake because I think the conversations we've been having about the villages and the differences between and the urban schools, we had came to the same place about we need to have one tree code for the whole city. And I don't disagree with what you want to achieve with that, Mary, but I don't want to put it in here because I don't know what to do with that yet, and I think it's really complicated.
I'd just like to, again, put a holder in there.
I'll think about that one. All right.
Ron, did you have one comment to make?
I did.
I was going to ask the public if they had one last comment to make.
They can go first, but, so I know this is kind of I don't want to be a negative, and I certainly know that this can be a sore spot, and I don't want to offend anybody, but even experts need coaching assistance sometimes, right? NFL football players, they need a coach. I think we need a coach to look at this and help us make sure that we are nailing this thing down. And if it costs us $100,000, if it costs us $200,000, I think it's an investment, because if we get it right, we'll get that money back tenfold. If we get it wrong, we're going to be hosed. And I think we just should be prudent, and I would like to make the recommendation to City Council, make a motion that we look for a third party to assist our staff in making this vision and helping us guide our thoughts and processes into a really polished off document. I love my city very much. I want a rock star document. I want the best possible outcome for our city. I don't want to sell short. And I think, like what Ken has said, if we make it really, if we do a top-notch job, we don't have to sell the city short and try and lure people here with incentives. We make the vision very clear. We back it up with really solid code, and I think we need help with that as well. And then we can move forward with peace of mind, and it'll be an investment, and we'll get it back. But if we don't, I think we'll be having this conversation in 5 years from now saying, what did we do wrong? And I just don't want to have that conversation. I want to knock the ball out of the park first time. All right, thank you. Actually, I would like to make a motion to City Council that we look for a third-party assistant to help our staff with baking this vision.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion dies. Does anybody else want to make a last comment?
David's ready.
We do something better than East Valley. Maybe it's my prejudice about Kent and the old East Valley freeway or highway and what was the Almost Live show. And, East Valley just doesn't make it for me. But I don't have a great solution because you're not going to call it Sammamish because West Sammamish or something, so, which it's, so I don't know. It just bugs me.
So take it under
East
advisement.
Lake is closer.
If you can come up with a better name, then.
I'm happy for y'all to send me names.
And I just have one last pitch. You talk about East Lake Sammamish Parkway and all the roads. It's how do we get across the roads? It's not how do you parallel the roads. And that is why you need to make it pedestrian friendly. And last time this plan got written, everything was how do you get across, just walk down it. And Gilman Boulevard, it said, people aren't really going to want to go across the road. And so it's not going to be a pedestrian-oriented street. And I think he said, all of our streets need to be looked at as pedestrian-oriented if you want a future where people are going to be able to cross them. So again, one last pitch, some sort of connectivity overlay over the entire central Issaquah plan.
So since nobody else has any comment, I'm going to make one, a very short one, and it's just to agree with Connie in the way of I expect with the codes that are going to be put together, that you're going to see where the parks are going to be, how many homes you can build there, what it does to traffic if you put 7,000 new units in some area, how they're going to get out. Right now we have a traffic problem. We can't get around very well. And if you put 7,000 more units in here, you are going to have problems. And I can't see bringing down streets to make them, instead of 3 lanes to 2 lanes, I can't see us doing any of that. As to somebody's comment, if the intersections fail, well, they're already failing. We already have Fs in most of the areas in the city. So we still have that. So I think transportation is, you can say you're going to build all these homes, but you're going to have to have the access to be able to move people around. And when we had the discussion originally on the central area plan, I'm the only one that was on the PPC at the time besides Carl. And it was, yes, we're going to approve this as long as you do the codes to make sure that you know which area, how many homes are going to go in that area, where the traffic is going to be, how many parks are going to be there, where the parks are going to be. So I'm hoping that that's what the city comes out with, because, that's what we need. We need to know what we're going to do. We just can't let builders do what they want. So that's my 2 thoughts. So since it is now 10:25, I'm going to call this meeting to close, and thank you very much for your comments. They were awesome.
So my one last ask. So we're going to be, we will do the edits to our best ability of understanding the direction that we got this evening. There will be an updated version of this probably by Monday. And if any of you would like to come to Land and Shore next week to talk about this, whether you like it or not, I'm ready for honesty. I think the council wants honesty. I would love for y'all to come and say it's wonderful, but if you think it's horrible and a train wreck, if you feel like, the council should hire consultants, I'd say bring it on. I think having some others come to Land and Shore and help the conversation along would be great. So Land and Shore starts at 6:30. I don't know we're kind of like the only thing on the agenda. There's a couple little things. So I would say for the most part, the bulk of the meeting will be talking about the visions.
Well, the agenda will be on the city website. So you'll be able to see what time and where you are on the agenda. So
It'll be up tomorrow. Wait, is tomorrow Friday? Yes, it will be up tomorrow. Yay!
Like an hour and 20 minutes. So I hate to do this, but this is a public hearing, and we still have a findings of fact that need a recommendation. And I know
There have been so many
I know that
changes on
it's
it.
kind of up in flux. How do you want to handle that?
So I looked at the piece of paper that I'm supposed to sign that forward this on, but there were so many things that you've changed on it, on that. So I don't think that there can be, I'd like to see it before you sign.
I personally feel that we had really rocked through a lot of stuff, and it's hard to say that we're all on the same page until we look at that page. And while I don't want to delay, I am hesitant to say findings of fact as implemented in our discussion. That makes me a little apprehensive.
So does that mean we go to the 14th? Oh, sorry. Does that mean we have to go to the 14th for you to make a motion to move this forward?
Well, let me ask you a question. Right now, is there anything else on our docket for the rest of the year?
No.
This is officially our last meeting.
It would be if the visions were done.
Madam Chair, how do you feel about?
We certainly can.
If we don't have the finding of facts, we can't go to Land and Shore, right?
No, you can go to Land and Shore.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I think the purpose of Land and Shore is really just to have a conversation with the committee. If there's commission business to do, my suggestion would be have a quick meeting on the 15th? 14th. This document will be done and baked. It will be through Land and Shore. Well, it could be through Land and Shore. Only they laughed.
It was maniacal.
So you guys will have a document that at least staff feel is done and representative of this conversation. So at that point, you guys can review that document, have a conversation, and then do your findings and have that done in advance of the council meeting on the 18th, which still kind of works.
This still will go to a discussion of Land and Shore.
This is still, this is still going.
So this will still go.
There will be a new version that they will get by, I don't know that by tomorrow, so it's tomorrow now, right? Tomorrow's Saturday. So we will, as soon as possible, I don't know that it's going to be tomorrow, it might be Monday. So there's maps to do,
So all those pretty pictures and all that stuff has to be done. So at least it's going to Land and Shore, and if all of you, any of you want to go to the meeting, it would help progress it through.
It would help staff. We would appreciate any
What if we do it
additional.
virtually? Can you
Can't
do
do
it?
that.
Can't do it virtually?
We can't do it we can't have a meeting basically online, can we?
PPC?
Yeah.
No, it
you
violates the
can't do
Open
that.
Meetings Act.
It has to be an open meeting and all that stuff, so.
We can have it in a van, though.
But it was noted on the meeting that there was going to be a van. I'm surprised that other people didn't join in, because some people that were here had said they wanted to go.
David's driven with me before. I remember one time
And the
driving
last-
over a giant mountain of dirt, David in the car.
And when you were driving us, you managed to do some strange things, yes. But
Just for the record, just for the record, no driving laws were broken while I was driving a city vehicle.
remember, this is recorded. So if any of you want to go to Land and Shore and continue this on, and then we'll have a final discussion on the 14th. You'll have the information in front of you, and then you can forward it on with my signature on it.
Yeah.
Okay. All agreed? Okay, although I closed the meeting at 10:25, I'm going to again close it at 10:30. So with that, turn off your microphones.